Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Royal Cornwall Hospitals NHS Trust Board, held in public today. Really warm welcome to members of the public who are joining us. We are still one of the outliers in the country for the number of people in our community who do look in on us, and also I know we have a lot of members of staff, so you really are very welcome. Just to remind board members, the meeting is live streamed and a recording of the meeting will be on the Trust's YouTube channel. And reminding members of the public that the Teams Live has got a feature of live substitutes, which can be accessed by clicking on the screen. I know we are all aware now of the board etiquette and housekeeping, but if people could keep their mics muted, if not speaking. Everyone introducing a report should assume that the board members will have read it and highlight only key points. Questions will be raised once the speaker has finished their introduction. We continue to try to avoid the use of acronyms, so please, newer members, ask questions if we start to use acronyms. And we haven't got any fire alarms planned today, so should the alarm sound, we should vacate the building and gather in the car park. Members of the public, please raise any questions using the Q&A function on Teams, and they'll be reviewed by our company secretary as per the protocol. Those questions will be put to the board at item 18, and our company secretary will ask the questions on your behalf and seek a response from the appropriate director. We are hoping to conclude our meeting in public around about 1 o'clock. There will be a 20-minute or so lunch break after item 13, which is the Finance and Performance Committee Assurance Report. We have apologies for absence today from Adam Broom, Non-Exec Director, and no other apologies from those usually in attendance. So could I ask whether there are declarations of interest from members of the board on today's agenda? No, I think I'm seeing shaking heads, so that's helpful, thank you. Just for people's information, our register of interest is included in the agenda pack and it's available on the Trust website. Are there any matters of accuracy on the minutes of the previous board meeting held on the 4th of January? I think I'm seeing shaking heads. Thank you very much. That brings us then to the action log. Are there questions in relation to matters on the action log? That has been updated, but there may be questions members of the board have. Well, in that case, I have some. I'm just wondering on item 161 on the action log. I don't know whether Alison's with us. She probably is. I was just wondering, oh no, it's not Alison, I beg your pardon, it's you, Alistair, when that 7-day service template is going to come to QUAC, please.
So I believe the 7-day services paper is due to come to QUAC in April.
That's really helpful, thank you. And the other thing that I think maybe will pop up later on the agenda, so we could address it then. I'm just wondering about item 167, the Organisation Development Programme, and what resolution is proposed, but I think we could pick that up under the IPR, if that's all right. Thank you. And then item 120, the Learning Disability and Autism Guidelines. I was just wondering if there's an update as to when that may be implemented.
So across both RCHT and CFT, the team are working on that. It's due to come up through the Learning Disabilities and Autism group this month, so it should be going to QUAC in April.
That's really helpful. Thank you very much indeed. Are there any other matters arising from the log? Alison?
Just to report on the charity annual account and reports that the communication team have been busy putting together a new film, which should be ready shortly to showcase all the work that the various funds have benefited.
That's really great, and thank you for that update, Alison. That's helpful. Anyone else? Okay, that then brings us to, sorry, if we could agree then those actions proposed as complete. So many of us here today, it's lovely, so nods around the room will do. Ella.
Sorry, Maury, I couldn't get my hand up in time on the minutes. There's just a very small change. The date of the last meeting, it says January 2023, and I think it should be 2024. I just noticed that. I thought I put the wrong pack when I was reading them. So
Spotted, Ella. I hope it would be different from January 2023. Thanks very much for that. Okay, that's going to bring us to item 5, our board story. And for information, we always try to take a patient or a staff or a community story to start our board meetings because that's the reason we're all here. And it seems proper and always very helpful to hear these board stories. So if I can invite you, Kim, our Chief Nursing Officer, to introduce the item. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you, Chair. And never have I been more relieved to see Thomas Richardson with us this morning, because please, if members of the board will keep your technical questions without putting Thomas on the spot. But a really warm welcome to Thomas, who's the Imaging Quality and Service Improvement Lead, who I'm delighted has joined us this morning. So today we're talking about the recent upgrade to the scanners as part of a recent major capital works project, where the scanning department was rehomed in the new wing in Trelawney and the scanners were upgraded. And this story we're really privileged that Joan, as you will hear, has shared her story about the improved patient experience. So the benefits for the Trust and for our patients: the scanners were updated and they feature the latest Blue Seal technology magnet. They are ultra low helium, and that means they hold a fraction of the helium that the older MRI scanners used to hold, which makes them safer and more cost effective to run, which enables us to save thousands of pounds each year. Philips are wanting to use RCHT's new department as a reference site, as they are so impressed with how the unit has turned out. And that's a real good shout out to the team who have worked so hard and our clinicians who have fought the good fight for many years to get this upgrade in place. The in-bore experience can have an external HDMI port, and that means you can play anything on the screen. These cost around £35,000 a scanner, and the department was gifted these through the hospital charity, which is really good use of charitable funds. As regards to patient experience, the new scanners have a compressed sense technology, which enables shortened scan times and better quality images, particularly for more complex sequences. And on the other scanners, it takes about 5.5 minutes to run a sequence. On the new scanners, this drops to about 3 minutes. So that's really impressive. They have comfort tone technology for patients who are really struggling with noise, and this makes the scanner run really more softly. We have had this previous form of soft tone, but this is a far more effective program. Whilst this does extend to scan time, the suppression of the noise is now significant, and having been around the department, that's something that the patients have spoken very, very warmly around. The scenic screen and the music is called the in-bore experience, and we are one of the first hospitals in the country to have it. The only other place in the southwest that has it is Taunton at Musgrove Park. The announcer can speak in over 30 languages, and there is a screen showing symbols and signs for patients who cannot hear or would have difficulty understanding the spoken instructions. And this makes it far more accessible. And I think it follows on to our board story last month when we're talking about some of the work we're doing to increase effective communication. The bore is wide bore design, and the bore size is 70 centimetres instead of 60 centimetres. And the old scanner maximum patient weight was 150 kilograms. The new one is 300 kilograms. And the preliminary audit results suggest abandoned scans due to claustrophobia have more than half since the arrival of the new scanners, which is really, really important. And on that note, Pete, if we can share Joan's story, please.
I'm Joan, and talking today about my two different experiences in the scanner. was frightening, claustrophobic. I used to keep my eyes tight shut the whole time and then count the seconds as to how long it might take to keep my mind occupied. Yes, very much so, yes. Oh gosh, I didn't want to come out of the new one. It was lovely. All the fish and the music. Oh, it really was quite relaxing. You even ignored the banging, the magnets or whatever it is. It was absolutely brilliant. Never worry about it again. No, never. It was really good. Yes. Brilliant. It was like big goggles I had on, and all I could see was the fish in the water and the weed and relaxing, totally. It was brilliant. Oh, that's always good. It's very clear, and the instructions are clear all the time. Yeah, no problem. So helpful, so friendly. You couldn't fault them in any way. They just put you at your ease straight away. It was good, yes.
The scan area is wonderfully big and spacious, very clean, but not very scary, as a previous MRI in the bowels of the tower block always made me feel anxious. Not on this occasion, thank you, and the undersea video was a brilliant idea.
Friendly staff and put at ease, new MRI scanning and a positive overall experience, as I've never opened my eyes before and did on this occasion. Helped watching the soothing video of the dolphins.
Wow, what an improvement. At my last MRI in one of the outside porter buildings, I had a panic attack upon entering the big tube and had to really calm myself down to go through with it. This evening I was due to have the MRI carried out in the scanning department in the GR floor of the tower block, but as they were running late, I didn't have a problem with that. These things happen in hospitals. I was asked to go to the scanning department in the main building, and wow, how lucky was I. I got to use the new reflective visor. I'm sorry, that's probably not the right description, but I've forgotten what the wonderful staff called it. That beams relaxing images from the back wall to the visor while soothing music was played through the earphones. What an incredible improvement this will be to anyone lucky enough to use it in the future. I was dreading the scan, but it was so relaxing and not a trauma at all. Thank you to all those who fundraised and fought for this equipment. The scanner itself was also so much better. I cannot describe how this equipment will help everyone who gets to use it. The wonderful doctor or clinician who kindly ran the scan and showed me the interactive map for the children to use. How wonderful this is too. The whole area was so beautifully decorated and peaceful too. Well done, Royal Cornwall Hospital. This is a huge improvement and such a wonderful asset. My scan was at around 7:20 p.m. If a message can be sent to the staff on duty in both scanning areas to say thank you for their help and kindness, I would really appreciate it.
A new scanner, it was so much better experience, staff lovely as ever.
The new scanner was less scary and claustrophobic, everything clean and fresh.
Thank you. Thomas, I don't know if there's anything you would like to add before we open up to questions.
I think, good morning, everybody. I think I just want to add the thanks from our staff, in particular in MRI, for bringing this, making it happen and bringing this equipment to us. It's just a world away from what we had, and the patients are really benefiting from it. We have this wonderful new technology as well. We're able to do things that we weren't before. So just a huge thank you to all of those that made it possible.
Thank you very much indeed. Wow, what an amazing story, and so welcome. It's lovely to hear so many people who've had a much more positive experience. I think a lot of people worry about those kind of scans, and I thought the lady who said that she'd been very frightened, but it was absolutely fine, we didn't need to worry about it, was wonderful. So thank you so much for bringing that to us. And also, Thomas, thank you very much for being with us. Colleagues, I'm sure there will be comments around the room. Ella seems to have got in first. So Ella, any comments or questions?
Yeah, it's really fantastic to see, and what a stark difference when somebody's had a previous experience versus the new. I just wondered, Thomas, on that note, do we send out information in advance to patients so that if perhaps they have had a less favourable experience before, they could be reassured that their next experience will be better because of us having invested and now have this equipment in place?
So this is our next step, is actually making it more public. At the moment, we do have a little moniker on the letters to say if you have concerns to call us. But obviously, it's come to a stage now where we need to start selling it a little bit more. So that is in the pipeline for us here, is to have something to say if you have struggled before. Give us a call and we can make sure you're put on the nice machinery.
Lovely. That sounds great.
Thanks, Ella. Ian.
Yeah, thank you. Really excellent story to hear about, isn't it? I think I just wanted to make that comment on the charitable funds aspect of it, and thank members of the public and staff who've done lots of fundraising events to raise that significant sum of money that was used for the inboard experience, because clearly from that video, I think you can tell that that's one of the big things that makes a difference, and that's fundamentally what charitable funds is about, improving patient experience and care. So yeah, thank you to everybody that's helped raise funds for it to make it possible.
Thank you for making that point, Ian. Absolutely right. And, you know, when people raise money in these ways, it is through coffee mornings, it is through baking cakes, it is through all of those things. And often it's in dusty and damp halls, isn't it? So yeah, thank you. You're absolutely right. Rob.
Thank you for sharing this with us. It is a really, really good news story on a number of channels for me. The first thing is for us to celebrate that actually Philips want to use us as a site to show other people what can be done. It's another thing that shows where RCHT is striving forward, making an impact. But the biggest thing that struck me was the stat you said, Kim, of the 50% of claustrophobic patients now 50% more having a scan as a result of the investment we've made, and with the charitable funds as well, allaying patients' fears. And I really liked, Thomas, how you described the next step you want to take is how we sell this service. Because for me, we've got an opportunity for how we can ensure our population get access to our equipment by explaining that actually things are moving forwards. Your experience you might have had last year, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, is different now. So do please come forward, because we know that getting our patients through this type of diagnostic leads to outcomes, favourable outcomes for people. So just to try and join that up, in my past, I was involved in MRI scanning a long, long time ago, and they were dark rooms that we really struggled to get people to come and have the scans. Now, to be in a position where people will feel more relaxed and come and have them is definitely really positive. So Thomas and wider team, thank you. And yes, please do the marketing piece. Really, really helpful.
I almost feel as though I want to get this presentation on the television or in the newspapers or something, because it is really important that we get the message out, isn't it? So thanks, Rob. Alistair.
Yeah, just a comment and a question. Really, I think it's really important, isn't it, that when patients do suffer with claustrophobia and can't go through with a CT scan, then the next step for those patients is usually that they have to have the CT scan done under a general anaesthetic, which massively increases the risk. So this clearly improves patient safety from that point of view, and it will allow us to get through our diagnostics quicker. The other question is, I just wonder whether we could be a bit more proactive in that, do we have a way of flagging patients on the system who have claustrophobia so we can preferentially put them through this scanner so that we don't have to rely on them to contact us and say, I had a problem previously? I just wondered whether we could sort of go out and be more proactive rather than be passive about that.
Thomas, are you able to respond to that?
Yes, absolutely. So we do have on our CRIS radiology system, if we're aware of people who've had a previous experience, bad experience, they will have a little claustrophobic alarm on there, and our bookings team are proactive at giving them first disposition of the new scanners. So if we see that, we know they need all the tools possible, and it comes through various different channels. So like I say, if they've had a previous difficulty with the scanner, that's one way of being flagged. If they've been picked up elsewhere as well, the PACS team regularly update our alarms through Maxim's alarms. So if they've been put on by other means, or even other trusts, say if someone's had a bad experience at another trust in the Southwest Peninsula, that alarm will carry all the way through. So there's a few different ways we can pick up on it.
Thanks very much, Thomas. Steve?
Yeah, fantastic story. Great example of teamwork, charity support, using technology to transform experience. I think Kim touched on the kind of financial benefits that fall out of it as well. So really well done, Thomas, and everyone who's been involved. It did make me reflect, Mary, on the budget yesterday, which identified £3.5 billion of technical investment in the NHS to drive transformation and productivity. And this seems a really kind of clear example of what these sorts of things can achieve. So I wonder if there's an ask of Ella perhaps to coordinate some work to come back to board about what do we think that Cornwall and Isles of Scilly element of that 3.5 billion could be best used for. Now, this isn't an immediate action. That I think that investment is scheduled for 25, 26 and beyond. But I think that could be something really powerful to have back to the board about what are the range of digital, technological and other investments that would drive these kind of improvements across the rest of our services.
It's a great idea. We might as well get in first, might we? And with an example that can show tangibly why it's worth us doing it. So, yeah, great idea, Steve. Anybody else? So I think perhaps, Thomas, if we could really share our thanks through you with the whole team and listen to the positive things that were said about the staff. That's just to everybody's credit. We're really proud of what you do, really, really grateful. And that's some fantastic stories. I don't know, Kim, if you did want to say anything else or...
No, just to say thank you to Thomas for taking the time to come and present with us today. And Thomas, thank you very much for what yourself and the team do. Clearly a very, very good example of patient transformation with good outcomes and experience. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. It's really lovely to share the good and to talk about it and sort of share the benefits made. So thank you all for having me, and thank you, Kim, for presenting that part and just thank you to everyone for making it possible, and we look forward to seeing you. We look forward to scanning more people. And huge thanks to Joe and Megan for putting the film together, and Joan, of course, for coming in and especially to do that day. So we really appreciate it. Thank you.
That's great, Thomas. Thank you very much indeed. And as ever, you are very welcome to stay for the rest of the public meeting, but I suspect you may have other things to look at as well. But I appreciate you coming. And I wonder, Lindsay and Sue, if we could also note our thanks to the charitable funds and the fundraising that's gone into this. I don't know whether they've had a chance to see that film, but they might really like to. So perhaps we could make that offer. Super. Thank you very much indeed. So if we could then come on to item 6, which is my report. You have it in front of you. I'm very happy to take questions, but perhaps while you're thinking about whether there are questions on my report, I always have sad and happy duties, don't I, to both welcome and say goodbye to people. So I am really sad to be saying goodbye to Sarah Newton, whose tenure comes to an end this month. Sarah, you've been an absolutely great board member. You've brought so much to us. You've done all the wonderful things that are listed in my report. But I guess what people who are used to being on the board or people who watch us regularly will note your really lovely way of putting questions. I really like the way you put questions. It's always very gentle and careful and thoughtful, and then you ask a really tough question. And we've just benefited so much from you, from your experience, from the knowledge that you have brought to us, and from your networking. And I know we've just been mentioning charitable funds, but you've made a huge difference there. And it doesn't say it in my report because it's fairly recent, but I know Sarah has offered to continue in some way involvement with the charitable funds, and we're incredibly grateful for that. But we really will miss you and miss your wisdom, but don't think we're letting you get away, because we'll be right back in touch with you should we need to. Would you like to say anything?
Yeah, well, thank you very much indeed. And it has been an immense privilege to serve on this board. And we've just heard in that patient story about the incredible work that goes on in this trust. And it has been a huge privilege, both the 10 years I worked pretty closely with the trust before I came onto the board, and the last 4 years, both the people on the board, but the staff in the hospital present and in the past. Immense privilege to have had this opportunity. And for anybody listening into this, I would thoroughly recommend, if you had the opportunity, to volunteer to serve on this trust board or any other of the NHS bodies in our community. It's a really positive way to make a contribution. So thank you for the opportunity, and I very much look forward to continuing to support charitable funds, and utterly determined to see that Women and Children's Hospital built, and the family unit that is going to go alongside it. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And you've given me a lovely segue into my other duty this morning, which is actually to welcome somebody, to welcome Uzma Bozai. We have in the NHS a scheme called the Next Directors Scheme, which is a way for enabling people, as Sarah has just mentioned, who may not previously have thought about working in a board or in the NHS. And so we are completely delighted to welcome you, Uzma. It was lovely to have a recruitment campaign and to have people applying to do this. And colleagues are aware that the programme offers a 12-month placement and provides support to senior people in our community to make that step into the boardroom. And I don't think we've noted it in my report, but I know this is something that Uzma has prepared herself for in terms of doing programmes about governance. So it's really nice to see your face around this table. So you're very, very welcome. And if you want to say anything, you're very welcome.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you to all of you for giving me such a warm welcome. It is an honour to be able to sit around this table and work with such a hard-working, committed group of people. And I hope that my fresh pair of eyes and different skill set will be valuable. So look forward to seeing more of you all.
Thank you very much, Uzma. That's great. And I also have noted in my report we've been successful in appointing one more substantive non-exec director, and we are recruiting for another one. And perhaps just before I finish on non-exec directors, also to let board know that following a process of nomination and election, we're really pleased to welcome Isabel in yet another role for us, Isabel. I do feel you're stepping into Sarah's shoes, actually, and picking up all sorts of pieces of work for us as a board. But the senior independent director role, which Sarah has carried out, you have now been elected to, and it is an important role. It does provide that what in our trust is a triumvirate of the chairperson, the deputy chairperson, who is Richard, and the senior independent director. And these things are very important. It's very important that should there be something that people feel they can't address to me, there should be somebody else that can be addressed. But it is actually those extra heads and that extra wisdom that we really value. So you're very welcome to that job as well, as Isabel, thank you. I will stop there, but I'm very happy to take any other questions on my report. Nope. Okay, in that case, please could we receive and note the report, and we'll move on to Steve Williamson, our Chief Executive, to your report, Steve. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. Just a couple of things I'll draw out from the report. Firstly, that there are a number of really significant milestones in our transformation and capital buildings programme that are set out in the reports. So just to draw colleagues' attention to those, the groundbreaking ceremony for the West Cornwall Hospital outpatients that we undertook last week, that's the start of about a year's worth of work to deliver a fantastic new outpatient facility at West Cornwall Hospital. Secondly, the similar groundbreaking ceremony for our new elective centre at St Austell Hospital, another really important milestone, and we expect that to complete towards the end of this year. And you'll see perhaps not quite such an exciting development in itself, but a really important one. The commencement of the gravel pit car park extension works. That's a really important part of our Women and Children Hospital enabling works. And I don't think we've referred to it in the report, but we also had our first executive-to-executive meeting with Oracle Cerner in respect of launching the implementation phase of our digital electronic patient record e-health. So some really significant steps and milestones as we progress the strategic plan. So really, really positive to see those. They're important each in their own rights, but they all make up some of the key actions for us to progress this year and next year. You'll see the update about patient flow. From a winter plan perspective, we've seen significant delivery of a number of winter plan areas over the course of the last 2 months. There are also some areas identified in the report where that progress hasn't been progressed, particularly the 24 additional beds from a dementia and a residential perspective, and the primary care capacity, which hasn't been able to be delivered. So the winter plan progress, I think, in some areas has been really helpful to support flow out of Royal Cornwall hospitals. In other areas, there are some gaps, and we're working with colleagues across the system on options to mitigate the shortfalls in the winter plan. From the NHS perspective, nationally, there's been a real focus right across the country in March on what else can be done to further improve urgent emergency care flow, particularly the 4-hour performance in emergency departments, in minor injury units and in urgent treatment centres. So systems right across the country have been asked to deliver a minimum of 76% against the 4-hour target as measured at a system level. So in our case, that system would be Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, and that would encompass performance across all minor injury units, urgent treatment centres and the emergency department at Royal Cornwall Hospital. So colleagues are working really hard on that, and clearly colleagues have been working really hard throughout this winter on steps that can be taken to address that. We briefly mentioned the staff survey in the Chief Executive's report, and we are intending to bring a full report back to the next board and public in May. As you'll note in the report, the results are published this morning. They were published at 9:30 this morning. So, Mary, if it's okay, I was going to ask Alison just to give a very quick summary of the headlines that fall out of that report, just so we have that context as what's been published today. And then we'll bring a comprehensive report to the board in May. So, Alison, if I can hand over to you just for a couple of minutes to share the headlines as they've been published.
Yes, and I believe Peter's got a slide that he's going to share for colleagues all to see as well. So, first thing to say is thank you. So, thank you to all the staff and to all the care groups for their leadership. Because as you can see from the slide, we have a really good set of results here. So thank you for driving all those improvements. So we ran the staff survey between the end of September and the end of November, as all other NHS trusts did. Our response rate was 48%. And that is a 3% difference to other acute hospitals. There's 122 in our benchmark group, so we did 3% better in terms of take up. But I think what is really important is looking at the sea of green, where the results in all the people promise elements, because that's all the questions are categorized into the people promise, and you can see every single one is statistically higher and in terms of our difference between this year and last year. So I also just want to very quickly mention two particular questions that are really important. So one is, I would recommend my organisation as a place to work, and we saw an 8% increase compared to last year on that one. And the other really key question for us is, if a friend or relative needed treatment, I'd be happy with the standard of care provided by this organisation. And again, we had an 8% increase on that question. So altogether, a really great set of results in comparison to where we were. We still got more to do. So we haven't finished yet on trying to drive a really great staff experience and a great place to work, but very proud of everybody in achieving this result today. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. And I'm mindful board colleagues and members of the public won't have seen this particular slide before today, but given that the staff survey results were only published at 9:30 this morning, we thought it'd be helpful just to provide a headline summary that Alison's given, and we'll provide a comprehensive reports to the board and public in May. I'd certainly like to acknowledge a huge amount of work from colleagues right across our organisation on all of the challenges that we have and the great things that we deliver, and thank everyone who's taken the time to take part in the staff survey. It is very positive to see that improvement at a trust level in all areas, which is really important. There will, of course, at an individual team level be more local responses, some of which will be improvements, some of which may be reductions. So we'll be working closely with teams across the organisation to see what else we can do to deliver improvements everywhere. Just briefly, then, if I move on from a budget perspective, we're currently expecting to receive the planning guidance from NHS England for the next year next week. I think the latest update was that will be published at the start of next week, but we're working to a set of planning guidance as advised by NHS England regionally, and we expect to be submitting at a system level our first draft budget for next year towards the end of March. That work continues to progress. We also have the smoke-free pledge on the agenda, and I might ask Ella just to really briefly give a summary of the smoke-free pledge, as we'll be asking board members to give their support and approval for that to be signed. Ella.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So there is a brief overview paper in the pack. The smoke-free pledge came forward at the Integrated Care Board on the 11th of January, and all NHS organisations were asked to consider it, and it has now gone through at the ICB and the CFT trusts, Cornwall Partnership, Cornwall Foundation Trust and the Integrated Care Board. They have since signed up to the pledge. So we, as Royal Cornwall Hospitals, are now being asked to do so also. Internally, the exec team have taken this through our exec leadership team meeting, which includes our clinical directors, and there is strong support for the principles of this pledge. So it's something that, in terms of the principles, we really, really strongly support, because we understand the public health benefits, the wider benefits to our staff and patients of being able to access support when they are in the hospital. So there has been 3 years of funding from NHS England associated with this service, and we have grown our service in-house to be able to meet most of the elements of the pledge. We're doing really well, actually, against those elements of the pledge that are outlined in the paper. However, there's a slight challenge in that the direct costs currently are higher than the direct level of funding. The funding will continue as it is now into next financial year, but beyond that, the funding ceases and we will need to absorb this into our cost base as an organisation. We are in the process, therefore, of looking at what is the best sustainable model going forward, but we don't think that should detract from the fact that we support the principles of this pledge and we absolutely would like to sign up to our intent to deliver it. We now need to work with our partners across the system to look at the most sustainable long-term model to ensure we are able to meet the all elements of the pledge wherever possible. But our recommendation is that we would sign up to the pledge as it is the right thing to do and we understand the wider public health benefits.
Great, thank you for that, Ella. And then the last thing I just draw board colleagues' attention to is the governance improvement plan. And as you see, we brought forward an update on the improvement plan and we'll be asking board to agree and approve the actions that are proposed for complete in the plan. But really happy to take any questions on any of that board report.
Thank you very much indeed, Steve. Again, comprehensive and helpful report. Really grateful, particularly for the updates that you've put into it, Sarah.
Thank you very much. It's always an excellent report, and so thank you very much indeed. Obviously, we would all want to support this NHS smoke-free pledge for all the reasons that are articulated in the paper and Zoe has outlined. Also in the papers today, both in your report and later papers, we're seeing that we're really financially challenged, that the huge amounts of savings that we've been asked to make, in fact, are required to make by the system. We're struggling to meet them, and for some very good reasons, some very understandable reasons, pressures to do with industrial action, etc. So this does feel like a strange ask when we're struggling to meet the existing targets we've set ourselves, to commit to something that we can't really afford. And it's not that we don't want to do it, but should we be continuing to approve additional expenditure when we know we simply don't have the money? Tough though that is to say to our systems partners, but should we continue to do this?
Thank you very much, Sarah. Helpful point. Richard.
A very similar comment to Sarah's, but I think it's really just about understanding the sustainability of the funding of that, noting the benefits downstream that may flow from this in terms of health benefits, the impact on some of our long-term conditions that are driven by smoking. So I'm with Sarah. I think it would be really helpful to get that idea of where the funding gap lies now and what sustainable model we might take forward. So I'd like to see that the earliest opportunity. I also just wanted to comment on two bits of the report that haven't really been fleshed out but are in there. One is just that congratulations to Lisa on her senior leadership scholarship or grant programme for NIHR. Sorry, I'm struggling today. But also to note the cost improvement programme as well, that we've moved and made a significant shift actually to get 40% of that recurrent. It's been something that's been vexing the board for a while. We're not at the 60% where we thought we would be in the plan, but nonetheless that's a major shift, and so I wanted to send our thanks to everyone across the organisation who's contributing to that.
Thank you, Richard. That's really, really important point. And I'll ask you, Steve, if I may, to come back on the smoke-free pledge. But I think you're right to point out that achievement in the cost improvement programmes. It is massive, and it's massive compared to what we've been able to do in past years. So it is with great thanks, because a lot of work has gone into that. And it won't stop here. It will go on having implications, and people will be having to live by what they've agreed. But thanks for that point. I don't think anybody else is wanting to come in at the moment. Steve, do you want to come back about the smoke-free pledge?
Yeah, if I could comment on the CIP aspect as well, if that's okay. I think it's a really clear example to me, Richard, of the challenge from Finance and Performance Committee to our organisation on what else can be done to increase our recurrent CIP. So I think it is really positive to see that we're achieving 100% of our really significant CIP plan this year, and we've been able as an organisation to make a significant shift, as you've outlined, recognising that we need to go further again next year. So I think that's really helpful. In terms of the smoke-free pledge, I think it's a really important challenge to us, Sarah. The smoke-free pledge asks us to do three things. The first one is to acknowledge and recognise the impact of smoking on health, which I think we can do without any financial commitment. The second thing is to welcome the government's ambition to make England smoke-free by 2030, and I think again we can support that. The area we need to be clear about, I think, is the things that we're then committing to, and we'll see in the smoke-free pledge. There are 8 or 9 aspects that organisations are asked to commit to. It seems to me that we could, as a board, sign up to those commitments within the resources that are allocated and available to us. So that way we potentially would balance the commitment to these areas with the resources that are available. And I think Ella was touching on a course of action that would allow us to review resource allocation within the organisation and across the system to deliver that within a financially sustainable envelope. So that would probably be my suggestion if board members were minded to, that we sign up to the pledge within the resources that are available to the organisation for the reasons that Sarah has described.
I think that's a really helpful suggestion. Sarah, how do you feel about that?
I think that's a really good suggestion. And just to end on a positive note, I think we should also recognise the huge achievements we've had on apprentices, which you drew out in your report, which we haven't touched upon orally in this session. And so many apprentices at the trust have gone on to win awards, and I think that's really positive news as well.
Thank you, Sarah. I actually met one of our new apprentices the other night, unexpectedly, and she was completely singing praises of the plan and of the staff that she's working with, which is greatly to people's credit. I'd also like to comment on the positive aspect around the government improvement plan and thank Lindsay and the whole governance team, as well as everybody else, for the work that's gone into getting us here. Governance is a bit like equity. It's everybody's business. It's not just Lindsay's business, and keeps us all safe. And I was in a private conversation recently with a member of the NHS teams who was saying how pleased they are with us to have made the progress we've made. Compared with other trust perhaps that are taking a little longer. So I really think we should take that as a compliment and be pleased about that. Aled.
Thanks, Mary. I was just wondering, Stephen, reflecting on the winter plan number 14, and the extent to which seasons come, seasons go, winter will be here again. So does this roll forward though, the 24 additional beds, the primary care capacity, into a spring plan, into a summer plan? There's some continuity around this. I mean, obviously, I assume it doesn't stop, but that's kind of my query, really.
Yeah, so that's a really important question. The elements identified in the winter plan were for this winter. As a system, as a health and care system, we identified about £3 million of resource available to invest in the winter plan. Whilst these things don't exactly match, as an organisation, we were forecasting about a £3 million surplus for this financial year, and it's that context which has been part of enabling the system to invest for the winter that we're just kind of starting to come out of now. So the example of 14 dementia beds that you're asking about, 10 other residential beds were temporarily funded for this winter only. A number of other actions were temporarily funded for this winter only. There is a full winter debrief at a system level scheduled shortly, which will identify, of the actions that were put in place, which ones might need to be considered for sustainable investment going forward. Those things would form part of the 24-25 budget kind of finalisation. So that work's underway at the moment, but I think I'll check with Ian. I think it would be right to say that the winter plan elements which were temporarily funded for this winter are temporary, and they wouldn't currently be committed to for future investment at this stage. Is that right?
Yeah, that is correct, Steve. And it's important probably just to say in that there's a system-wide review of the investments that we've made going on, because clearly to recognise, as Sarah's picked up and Steve's referenced, the financial challenge going into 24-25 is significant, and making sure that the interventions we've got in place are the right ones, and for us to continue to support through winter and other seasonal pressures in terms of peaks in the summer as well. So that's a piece of work that's going on around other capacity that was in place before winter through things like virtual wards, etc. as well, to make sure we're getting best value out of
Just to guess the connection as well, that the winter plan was driven on the basis of ensuring the best possible access into urgent and emergency care across the system. There are though financial implications, so that the financial implications of those community beds not being in place to an extent translates into more patients in Royal Cornwall Hospital beds waiting for discharge than would otherwise be the case. And we know from the focus that this board and our Finance and Performance Committee have given that one of the impacts of that is significant additional agency costs as we care for more patients in the hospital than we'd otherwise be expecting to do. So whilst they're driven primarily, quite rightly, from a patient care perspective, that they have a financial implication, and going into a very challenging financial year in next year, then that continues to be a challenge for us.
But it's an absolutely right point to raise, because like other places, our winter plan does tend to need to be looked at ready for a summer plan, because we have the same, if not quite the same, similar pressures in the summer. So a really helpful point to raise.
If I could perhaps ask Robin to add anything to that from a winter plan perspective as well.
Thank you, Steve. So I was going to add that we term our seasonal plan, but the official terminology is winter plan, and that's because we do a summer plan and a winter plan, and we've got the summer plan scheduled to come to Quality Assurance Committee later this year, and we go through the winter plan in the same way. For us as an organisation, all the parts Steve's outlined, absolutely. But in Steve's report, you'll also see there's been Steve chaired meetings with our acute medical consultants and our ED consultants, and that's in response to how do we move ourselves forward in general with our flow actions, the actions that our organisation as a whole can take that decompress the emergency department at the same time as delivering the capacity we need for our elective work. And I would do some join up for us here that when we get to the IPR, we'll talk about some of it, but the improvements we're seeing in our elective position will ultimately reduce some demand at our front door as well. So it all ties together, but absolutely we will be bringing to the Quality Assurance Committee what else we're planning to do for summer, because we see a equal level of activity peak in the summer as we do in the winter, just a different type of peak.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other questions or comments for Steve? I don't think so. In which case we're asked to receive and note the report. I'm very happy for those in the room to nod at me. Those in the not in the room will have to write in the chat, please. We're also then asked to approve the recommendation to sign up to the smoke-free pledge. And I haven't got the words in my head, Lindsay, but if we could sign up to what Steve proposed in terms of the right way forward and identifying ways of paying as we go forward. And we're also asked to note the update on the government's improvement programme and agree the actions proposed to complete. So people can nod at me in the room, which is helpful, or shake your heads, but we do need approval in the chat, from approval or otherwise, from the people who are not able to be in the room. Thank you, and thanks very much, Steve, for that report. That brings us to our strategy part of our agenda, and we have our quarterly strategy implementation report, and Ella is going to briefly present this to us, as it has been to committee meetings that have received the relevant parts of the report. So Ella, just a very brief word and then any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So as you say, this paper has been through the committees. It reviews progress in Q3 of 23-24, which is actually the year end for the first year of our strategy, because the strategy started in November, if that makes sense. The roadmap in this paper, I think, is a really important element that will continue into next year. And we I just wanted to note that we have had this blown up so that it will be a really large wall installation in all of our three main sites, and that's to help with communication of this strategy and the key milestones for all staff and for the public, and the initial engagement on that has been really, really positive, so I'd urge people to, when you're next on site, to take a look at that. And as we move into the next report on this, we will be refocusing on our year 2 priorities. So we have taken a bit of a stock take. You'll note in this report we've attempted to RAG rate our progress, and at committee we had some in-depth discussion around this RAG rating, and I was asked to just clarify that the RAG rating for this purpose should not be taken as performance data in terms of our operational delivery as such, or financial delivery as such. It's more around, have we done the things we said we would do in our strategy? So it would be, say, for example, the financial elements come up as amber or green when we know, in fact, we have a significant challenge. So it's actually been really tricky for us to RAG rate this in a meaningful way, and we need to do more work on that, and it will change for the next time that you see it. So please don't take this as it's I suppose our team have the quality improvement methodology in them. We give it a go. We don't think we've quite landed it this time. It's better than it was, but it's not clear enough. So the RAG rating will evolve into the next iteration of this report. And I think it's really important for me to pull out that as we move into the next year, we've already noted through the development of our priorities for year 2 is a really challenging but exciting year for us, year 2 of our strategy. So we have significant financial challenges ahead, and our operational plan, really big things we need to deliver in terms of our elective and non-elective care. But we also have huge milestones on our major transformation, such as our e-care programme and our building hospitals programme. So they're the things that we will be looking forward to and reporting on as we head into the next year. I'd also draw the board's attention to the case study that we've included, and I'd welcome feedback on that. I think most committees felt it was helpful to do a bit more of an in-depth on some of our key milestones, and this one was our values, which are clearly really, really important to us. So I'll stop there, Chair, and be very happy to take questions.
Thanks very much, Ella. That's really helpful. Are there questions from colleagues on the report? Really nice to see the case study. I think that does it brings it to life, doesn't it? If there aren't any questions at the moment, Bob. Oh, Ian, you've got one.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's just really great to see all the achievements in there, isn't it? And Steve, you touched on some of the major developments in there, but some of the approvals of cases and the journey that we've been on over the last 12 months, that first year of strategy is incredible. I think Ella's point, and I heard that challenge at committees, is really appropriate in terms of, can we do more on some of these areas, and particularly the financial ones, in terms of our medium-term financial planning, which we cover at Finance and Performance Committee, in terms of embedding that, and we've done steps around SIP that's already been alluded to today. So I think we just need to collectively keep ourselves held to account on the further work we can do in some of those really key areas.
Yeah, thanks for making that point, because it is absolutely the point that our work is never done. It is that constant attention to these matters that makes a difference. So thank you. I just wondered, Sarah, and then I've got a point as well.
Thank you very much. I think it is an excellent report, and I echo what you said, Ian. I think a huge amount of progress is made, and it's great to capture that. I just wondered, when you gave us the detailed updates, we've got the estates and fire team with an amber about not having had their values workshop, and in the narrative there it talks about sickness in the leadership team. I'm just wondering, is this a flag that things are not going quite as we'd hoped in that really vitally important team? We know that we'd appointed some new people. There was some transformation work needed to be done there, and I'm just wondering, should this be raising a wider flag with us, that we should be focusing a bit more attention on that vital, important team that enables us to be in a safe and healthy working environment?
Steve, do you want to pick that?
Yeah, very happy to. It's certainly a very important area for us. My understanding is there were some operational pressures which informed the scheduling of the workshop. Notwithstanding that, I think that the question is a really important one. I'm really pleased to say that our new Director of Estates, Brian Johnson, is starting tomorrow. So really positive, and I think we're looking forward to Brian joining us to work with and support our capital and estates colleagues across the organisation, and the kind of challenges or risks that I think you're alluding to would be a core part of Brian's priorities. So that I think that's an important step to support our journey, and of course our estates colleagues are delivering some amazing things. And we touched on some of them from a capital programme perspective, but also facing some really significant challenges with the state of some parts of our infrastructure as well.
Thank you, Steve. Other comments? My comment question is, again, it may come up later in the morning, but it seemed to me appropriately that a lot of the delivery of year 2 implementation is going to be dependent on the delivery of the organisation development programme, and those seem to be really interlinked. I just wonder whether there's any comment possibly from Alison or yourself, Ella, and then on that point, whether the comes up under point 2.2, whether the implementation plan was approved. Don't know, Alison, are you able to help there?
Yes, so the OD implementation plan was approved. We did struggle with how we were going to resource it. However, a meeting has happened subsequently to the ELT meeting, and a way forward has been found. So we'll be in a position to get going on this fairly soon.
Helpful, thank you. Any other comments, questions? Richard.
I think the only other comment that came out of a subcommittee exploration of this, and Ella's alluded to it really, is as we move forward, it's a very positive report, and that's really welcome, and we applaud all of the things that have been achieved. It perhaps doesn't go into as much detail about the things that we said we might have done and we haven't been able to do, and bring out the learning of that. So I think in future reports we'll be looking for a little bit more of that interrogation of where we thought we would be. Are we there? And if we reflect that we are and we've done better, that's fantastic. But where we haven't achieved what we thought we might achieve, where do we learn and how do we rectify? But Ella's going to do that in the next iteration.
Thank you. And I think I was in a conversation yesterday about where we are on any improvement journey. It's all right not quite to have achieved something, and it's all right to flag it sometimes in a metric way. So we don't always like to say we're at a 4 or a 5, but if we are, it's better to identify that than not to. So that's a helpful point. Thank you, Richard. Alison.
I was also wondering on the RAG rating whether we are applying the same approach. So, for example, I was looking at one of mine, which the metrics is approximately 50% of services will be using managers self-service, etc. Now, we've RAG rated it amber because we haven't finished the rollout of self-service, but actually the programme is completely on target to where it needs to be and what we've planned. But we've said we haven't finished the programme, so therefore we've given it an amber rather than a green. So it might be about the way that individuals have assessed the RAG ratings too.
Yeah, you look as if you want to come back. Yeah,
I think that's a really good illustration of how difficult we found the RAG rating process on this. So I think, as I say, we just need to kind of learn from it and try and mature it for the next iteration.
Thank you. That's helpful. Let's not go into the technical detail of it any further. We'll leave expert brains to that. So, Ella, thank you for the report. We're invited to note the achievements and say well done for the achievements, and moving on to the next iteration. Thanks, everybody. Could we come to item 9, then the research and development strategy? And again, that's you, Ella.
Yes, thank you. So today I'm presenting to you our 4-year R&D strategy. It has been reviewed and endorsed by the Finance and Performance Committees and the Quality Assurance Committee for approval here today at Trust Board. It's also had really wide engagement and contributions from colleagues linked to our academic partnerships and the Southwest Clinical School. So I think it's been, I'm really proud actually of the process this has gone through. And I think that wide engagement reflects the fact that research and development is becoming more and more embedded into the mainstream and the core of what we do as an organisation. In our trust strategy, we state our commitment to expand our contributions to R&D, and this strategy is going to be really fundamental in how we do that over the next 4 years. We know that organisations that are active in research and development tend to have better clinical outcomes and better patient experience. We also know that there's real benefits to be derived in terms of staff fulfilment and development. So from that perspective, it's fundamental and really aligns to our strategy as an organisation. Just very quickly, I'll pull out for you some of the key things that this strategy says we will do. So it's really clear on the fact we are going to pursue university hospital status. We're going to upskill our workforce in research principles. We will be expanding our research facilities through delivery of this strategy, and particularly developing a validated research unit for phase 1 trials. We are seeking to emerge as leaders for R&D, both regionally, which we already are really strong, but also nationally. And we will be expanding our system-wide approach to R&D. So the team have already been really proactive leaders in setting up the One Cornwall approach, and this strategy builds further on that. And that the impact of that will be looking at delivering improvements in care, translating the research into practice, and also will be embracing a digital approach, which again aligns as we now embark on our new kind of digital era in terms of our electronic patient record. The R&D team are stating their intent in terms of also digitising research. So I hope you can all see how this very much aligns with, and in fact underpins and will be integral to us delivering our overarching strategy. And therefore I'll stop by asking the board to approve the strategy, but also being very, very happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Ella. And I was really impressed with the consultation process that's gone on. Really, it's just excellent. And I think you've touched on the important points about research and development. It is really important for patient care, and it's really important for recruitment. And I met a man only the other day. He was admiring my car in the car park, and he was telling me about a very poor diagnosis. He's one of our staff, a very poor diagnosis he'd had with his lung cancer, and he'd been put onto a clinical trial program and was now thoroughly better. And it's just really nice to hear these stories, and that's what this is all about, isn't it? So thank you for the work you've done. Any other comments, Sarah?
Thank you very much, Chair. I very much support this strategy and endorse what's been said about, what excellent work you put into developing it. I note one of the challenges in the report is the capacity of our workforce to take on additional clinical research. So acknowledging all the benefits to our staff and patients of being able to do this, I'm wondering what consideration has been given to looking at some new models of employment. So, for example, junior doctors who recently left the trust, perhaps to balance their work-life commitments. They've left because they want to take care of children, but could give us so many hours. Consultants who may have recently retired but want to stay involved with the trust. To what extent we're looking at models of employment which would capture this talent that we've got in the Duchy, which isn't currently being used, to perhaps backfill staff so that they can participate, or to provide support to the research programme, acknowledging that we do get new funding for this. This is additional funding that comes with research.
Thank you, Sarah. I can see Alison's really wanted to come in on this one.
Yeah, absolutely agree what you're saying, Sarah, that this is an opportunity to look for new models, but also I know a lot of staff are really interested in this anyway. So yes, it brings challenges, but I think not only from a medical perspective, but also from a nursing perspective, a lot of staff will be interested in having split contracts where they can do service delivery as well as research. But there'll be more that we can do to be able to increase our numbers from a staff who are participating and really support the paper for all the benefits that everybody said previously.
Thank you, Alison. Aled.
Thank you, Mary. Thanks to Ella for the consultation, which was excellent, and for Jaya as well. Really felt listened to from a university's perspective. I think it's cross-cutting in its transformation research, both in terms of staff benefit, patient benefit, infrastructural, population health benefits are fantastic. Really well positioned, the R&D strategy. I think going back to Sarah's point about capacity, only yesterday, from a University of Plymouth perspective, we were lining up meetings around joint contracts, clinical academic contracts, especially for nurses, midwives and allied health professionals. And I know the university trust status will only add kind of fuel to that. So there's a lot of really excellent potential around this, but some challenges as well around the cost base, modelling it. And also I think the one thing is joining R&D with a broader innovation and learning platform, which I've mentioned to Ellen and others, kind of clarified where that sits within the trust. I wasn't quite seeing that, but I can see it now, and in a way it's that broader kind of knowledge translation innovation piece. But I can see it sits under Ella, but yeah, it's a really good start and very exciting to sign up to it and agree to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Richard?
Just in support of everything that's been said, it's probably for assurance for the board at the subcommittee level. So at Finance Performance Committee, we did approve this. We recognise this is a very sophisticated and ambitious plan, and it shows the maturity really of where RCHT is moving within the system to bring that research strategy together. But we also recognise, therefore, we probably need a more sophisticated resource plan to underpin it, and so we have asked for that. So hopefully the points raised by Sarah, Alice and Alid will get covered at a future Finance Performance Committee. We haven't given a specific date for that. We've asked Ella and the team to tell us when they feel they will be in a position to bring that forward, but we're expecting that in the very near future.
Thank you. Thanks, Richard. That's very helpful. Kim?
Yeah, so I think sometimes we forget programs we've already got up and running as well. So we're already looking really innovatively across nursing, midwifery and AHPs. So we've got the Chief Nursing Research Fellows. So those have have backfill, dedicated backfill, do research projects that are already in their sphere of influence, but these are for more junior members of staff. So we're in year 3. We've been fully recruited to all 3 years, which is really important. It sort of models on some of the work that the medical, I'm sure Alistair will speak about that, but it's how we grow that. We've also got some of our retired nurses through the legacy programme. So I think it's building on where we've got successes and then just branching that out.
Thank you, Kim. And if I could take Alistair as perhaps the last speaker on this paper.
Yeah, and just to echo what a number of people have said, especially Aled, I think not to forget that we've also had the really important conversations with the University of Exeter around how we can work with them to create shared posts and how we can develop research within our current consultant and medical workforce. I think we already have a lot of people who are invested in research, and we have you've seen we've got a really good research portfolio, but there's opportunities to expand that significantly, I think, going forward, and those conversations about how do we develop clinical academics are really important, but notwithstanding the financial situation that we find ourselves in as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. So Ella, thank you for that. I think we've had a really good and realistic discussion about this, and I know it's been through our 2 major committees. So, board, we're asked to approve this strategy for going forward for the next 4 years. And again, people in the room, happy for you to nod at me, but if you could indicate on the chat if you're not in the room, that would be really helpful. We're now coming to our safe and high quality care aspect of our agenda, and we're going to take reports from our assurance committees. Just to remind us again, and to remind members of the public, our committees do a lot of the work of the board. They have the opportunity to have more in-depth discussions and deep dives and other ways of understanding matters. And so we've relatively recently introduced a model of reporting to board where the chair people of each committee offer us their report and bring our attention to anything specific that we're needing to note. There is, of course, the opportunity for board members to comment on papers if we wish to. But that's why in this section of the meeting, we won't be taking great long parts of time on matters that have already been discussed. So that will be true of all of the committee assurance reports. And if we could begin, please, with Isabel going to give us the report on the Quality Assurance Committee. Thanks, Isabel.
Thank you very much, Mary. And I will be brief. As you say, the report is self-evident. It's part of the pack. So members will be able to see the issues that have been discussed at our committees. But to say that actually from the quality perspective, we actually have two reports running through the one paper. One which is referred to as Part 2 QAC, which is the Quality Assurance Committee made up from Royal Cornwall Hospitals Trust Committee and Cornwall Partnership FT Committee, where we come together to explore areas where there are shared agenda items and focus particularly around our services that are integrated. So I think from the perspective of this report, a couple of things I just wanted to share with the board and flag up. The first being that we're doing some work looking at the outcomes of the domestic homicide review, which was commissioned in 2023 by the Safer Cornwall Partnership. And there was a lot of cross-agency learning that's come out from that report and that review with specific recommendations for both our organisations. So as the two committees, we received assurance around the oversight of the actions, but we've requested that the system-wide plan around domestic homicide is received by this Part 2 committee because of the interdependencies across the board. So that was one area that I wanted to flag up. And then I think the other was really to say that as a meeting, we actually are really trying to focus on those areas of potential harm. And in two instances, we've looked in February at both the Integrated Falls Improvement Plan and the Pressure Ulcer Improvement Plan, both of which, of course, are pretty pivotal in terms of ensuring that we're minimising harm to patients who happen to be in our care. And I think one of the outcomes from those conversations in February was a request to see if we could dive a little bit deeper and request some triangulation around the data for both plans around falls and also pressure ulcers to see if there's any correlation with increased length of stay. So those patients that are with us for longer than we would wish, and the risk around loss of condition for these patients, is there any correlation around the data? So we've requested that to come back to our shared committees. In terms of the RCHT Quality Committee, some of it has already been covered in the agenda. So the first thing we did was recommend approval by the Trust Board of the research strategy. So delighted that that's just happened. But I think the other thing is that, again, as a committee, we're really focusing on recognising the high levels of operational pressure and seeking assurance that everything possible is being done to minimise risk of harm. There's a huge amount of work taking place that comes through to the committee, and as you've said, Mary, this committee actually does a lot of the backroom work ahead of coming to board. So some of the areas that we've really focused on recently have been deep dives into orthopedics, which we know is a major risk in terms of our operational position, but also cardiology. And I think there's been huge learning coming from external reports and data and statistics. As an example, the Royal College of Emergency Medicine, who've formed a correlation between
delays in the emergency department and the level of deaths. So all of those areas, as a committee, we take very seriously and we're reviewing. And we're very fortunate that we've got a very, very active mortality review and oversight group, which does a lot of the deep dive for us and brings those outcomes for us to discuss as a committee. So I think that's one thing to flag up. And the final thing I wanted to flag up for the Quality Assurance Committee is the continuing concerns that we have around the timelines for assessing the quality impact of all our plans going forward in 2024-25, particularly given the very tight timescales that Steve has outlined in terms of getting to a point where we've got a signed up budget and operational plan. We want to make sure that, particularly around our cost improvement plans, that sufficient consideration has been given to the quality impact of any of the service changes that are being proposed. So we've recommended a more detailed plan that aligns the quality impact alongside those savings, and to bring those back to committee. And we've asked to review those on a regular basis over the forthcoming 3 months. So I think that's probably where I'll pause. If there are any other questions, happy to take them.
Thank you very much, Isabel, and thank you to you and members of your committee, because you do a lot of the heavy lifting for us in a very important arena. Colleagues, are there questions on the report? Sarah?
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Isabel, and all for the fantastic work that you and your committee do. It's much appreciated. I really appreciate the operational pressures that we're under, and I very much understand from my own experience of doing walkarounds that we're not always able to deliver the quality of care that we aspire to do, and as a result, you know, things do happen. In those situations, the duty of candour is so important to patients and families, and I was concerned in the report, Isabel, that we've only got 71% compliance with duty of candour, so that's sort of almost a third of people not receiving that really important process. And I'm just wondering what assurance the committee sought around improving that position.
I think, Sarah, if you would, I'll perhaps come to Kim, because you raise a point that I've also noticed, and I think there may be a technical answer, but I'll ask Kim to help us here.
Yeah. So duty of candour comes in 4 stages. So out of that 71%, these are the more complex ones that everyone gets that immediate apology, but because it's 4-step stage, they could be in a coronial position, multi-agency. So a lot of our complex ones now, before we can do that 4th and final step, so everything's in train, but there are some complications around some of our more complex ones. So that's something both the governance and QAC keep an eye on, and they're usually really small numbers as well. So it isn't that everyone hasn't had first stage. I'd be more worried about the first stage non-compliance, but we absolutely fully recognise and we know in which stage each one is as it progresses, and we nudge if we think there's a block.
That's really helpful, Kim. Thank you. I'm just wondering if there is any other way of representing this, because this point has come up before, but probably not.
No, so if we can, for those in the boardroom that can remember, this is something that we were prosecuted for. So we're really, I know it's difficult, but we're really keen to maintain this 4-step approach. But we are reviewing it to make sure if there's any improvement we can make, we'd obviously do that.
Thank you very much, Kim. Are there other questions or comments for Isabel? Robin?
Just to build on the duty of candour and the impact for our patients and their families, we also are cognizant of when these events happen, the impact on our staff. So we also take the time to ask how our staff are. And although that's not recorded, it's definitely one of the things that every colleague around this table absolutely does when they're involved in these types of cases.
Well, that's really good to hear, because a long time ago when I joined the board, I don't think we were as good at doing that. So really helpful to hear. Any more? Okay. Ian.
Thank you. I was just going to follow up on Isabel's comments around the quality impact assessments. I think my reflection on that is that there is more we can do as an organisation on that, and particularly going into a more challenging financial environment. But I wouldn't think that's just a responsibility of QAC. It's really useful to know that that's happening in QAC, but also Richard as chair as FPC is making sure that that's something that's considered as part of the SIP reporting through Finance and Performance Committee as well. Because I think that we're doing very well on that, but we do need to be really mindful of where our risk appetite sits when we're looking at services. And there's lots of things we can do to be more efficient and productive and improve the care and standard of quality of care we provide. So yeah, just to capture that bit.
And I think it's really important. It's good to hear you say it, Isabel. It is so important to keep that quality voice in the room when we're talking about the very challenging budget that we're facing. So thank you, Ian. Right, I seem to be doing well at not seeing people. I can see, yes, Isabel, I can see you. Go ahead.
It's difficult when I'm not in the room to see who's seeing what, but just to follow up on Ian's point, I think the other thing to say is that we do, as committees, the chairs of committees do meet, because there's an awful lot of overlap between the issues that are discussed within the various committees. So we know that quality, overlays everything that should be happening in terms of the conversations around finance and performance. It's also really relevant in terms of our workforce committee as well, as well as audit and risk. So I think there's lots of opportunity to consider quality. I think the reason the committee were flagging up the concern was around the timeliness of getting assessments done when clearly the pressure is on to get us into a signed up position for the coming year.
Thank you. Kim.
Yeah, to go back to the EQIAs, which is the Equality and Quality Impact Assessments, Alistair and I are going to work really hard with the care groups this year to make sure that they're submitted alongside the business case. What we often find is there's a bit of a lag, and then we're doing them retrospectively. This year we want to get on the front foot to make sure that we're doing them. And whether, when we do them, we did them, I think, pre-COVID, as we called it a star chamber. It's having the right people in the room to answer the right question, but also to make sure that something that's being done in one care group hasn't disadvantaged another care group. And for us now, we have that added complexity of making sure as well what we're doing in one organisation doesn't upend another part of the system, which will be part of the work that we'll be doing with the ICB as a whole.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. We are asked to note that report. So again, nods around the room are helpful, and it brings us on to the two reports that have been to committee but do come to the board because of the nature of the report. So if I could ask Kim just briefly to give us the maternity and neonatal safety report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So noting that this always has a good airing at our Quality Assurance Committee, there are only three things I will briefly state. Most importantly, to note that we submitted our clinical negligence scheme for trust submission, and that was approved by ICB and submitted on time. We had a good conversation in many committees about the EuroKing E3, which is the digital system for maternity, which had a national patient safety alert in December. Now, our team have been working really hard around alternatives as this system was going to be pulled. However, we are now told that Magentus, that is the owning company, it's not going to be pulled. There will be a national solution that is aiming to come in at June. But that doesn't decry we will work with the company and as well as all our others. However, we will still to maintain our options just in case, but it's important to note that. The other question that came up at QAC was about the neonatal. So in November, it was reported that 6 of our patients were not given their IV antibiotics within the target. I've had a really good conversation with Chris Bell, one of our neonatal consultants, who was responsible for putting this pathway in. And we've agreed, as we do, and it's a learning organisation, this is not sepsis. So this is a pathway that is made for early onset neonatal infection. And it was really pleasing to know that he placed this pathway in situ. He's presented our work at the network meeting, and it's clear that no other units are auditing this. However, I have said, could we separate it out from sepsis to this, because it's really important if we're reporting the reasons why there was some delay. And it's really pleasing to note is to sometimes to allow the baby to have a feed, skin to skin time with parents. It's also acknowledging in this case 2 of the patients had real challenges with IV access that the team were working on, and there was a 1 to 5 minute delay with 3 cases because there was an absolute peak in the delivery suite workload, so quite a few of the staff had to go out into that area. So it's great we've got the information, but the learning is how do we separate that out, especially if you read it, most of us thought sepsis. So that is one of the learning things we'll take forward. And I think that covers everything, and I will leave it there.
Thank you very much, Kim, and you've absolutely covered one of my points, so that's helpful. Other questions, Calvin?
Just to add to Kim's point on the Magenta E3 system, that's actually due to be replaced by the eCare programme. So, if there had been a removal of it, that would have been a very significant programme when its replacement is already planned in.
Would you just say a bit more about eCare for the benefit of the public?
Yeah, so eCare is the name for our programme, which is going to replace many of our clinical systems. We've previously talked about it as our EPR, electronic patient record, but that's a very technical term. So eCare is a description for everybody to help them understand that it's about changing everything to a single electronic solution. So we'll be talking more and more about it over the course of the coming year.
Thank you very much. And on the back table there, for people who are in the room, there are some nice squeezy, I think they're hearts or something, and pens and various other entertaining items. So we could have a look at that. Ian.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to pass on my thanks to the team in terms of the comment that's in there around Ockenden funding and how they've had to use the resources in the most appropriate way, and acknowledging in the report that some elements aren't currently achieved. And that's something the team have done in all, representing all of our values. They've sought to understand the financial climate and the funding that's available, and get some really useful solutions on how we can implement a good chunk of the Ockenden requirements. There was 35 million announced in the budget yesterday in terms of Ockenden, but I think it's probably an element of the budget we probably need to see a bit more detail on what that means and how that money will flow to support that. So hopefully that's a positive element of the budget yesterday that will further support the work of this team.
Thank you for picking that up, Ian. I think that's really important. And I think going forward, and Sarah touched on this earlier, going forward, I think we're going to have to use those models more and more of saying, if we have got a very restricted resource, how can we do things differently? And that needs to be, throughout the hospital. So yet again, we might be learning from maternity. Yeah. Okay. Are there any other comments or questions? In that case, we're asked to note the Ockenden funding received in March does not fulfil all the requirements, and so that some elements won't be achieved at present. Note the maternity services updated position in relation to the Information Commissioner's Office request following the National Patient Survey alert for Euroking, and note the completion of the submission on the 1st of February. So if people in the room would nod at me and in the chat could please do that. And then Lindsay, if I could ask you to cover the quality assurance terms of reference.
Thank you, Chair. Presented are the terms of reference for the Quality Assurance Committee. There is one recommended change to the terms of reference, and this relates to the inclusion of the Interim Director of Nursing, Midwifery and Allied Health Professionals as being invited in attendance to the meeting. The committee reviewed the proposed changes at its last meeting, and it's recommended to the Board for approval today.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments? Seems like a very sensible move. So if we would again nod approval or do so in the chat. And I think we're not too far behind for inviting Sarah Coulter. We're now on item 11, the Guardian of Safe Working Hours Q3 report. And I think we have you with us, Sarah. Welcome.
Hello.
We're really happy to have you draw our attention to any particular aspects of this report.
Lovely, thank you.
I mean, things are ticking over okay in general. There's good consultant engagement with the exception report process, and that's kind of improving month on month, which is good to see that they're taking a bit more notice about it. As you'll see in my report, my 2 areas of concern are oncology and oral and max vax. Oncology, I think, can be fixed with extra staffing or even extra locums, because they seem to feel that it was an increase in their bed base that has caused their problems recently. Oral and max vax is a bit more of a tricky issue. It's definitely down to lack of staffing, probably lack of middle grade, probably lack of dentists in the county, but they are very frequently reporting every single weekend they're working over their hours. I think the average was 4 hours, but there are some shifts where they're doing 9 or 10 hours extra a day. So they're in serious risk of breaching their 72 hours. So I'm meeting with their rota coordinator to discuss that. I've spoken to Alistair and Jill separately about this, and the people that need to know about it do know about it. Immediate safety concerns, more of them are being declared, but you'll see from the report that actually I'm not really agreeing with them. I think it's just a bit of frustration that they're busy on the wards, but there's no evidence that there's harm or near harm to patients, so I'm not too worried about that. There is still some money left from the fatigue and facilities charter, and now that we've finally seem to have everything set up from the rest space, I'm going to discuss with the Junior Doctor Contract Forum what they want to spend the rest of the money on. There's about 16,000 left. There was very good response to the rest survey that was done. There was some concern that there wasn't enough, so there's an extra room being made available in the paediatric department. Obviously our rooms will be available soon, and I think the only thing that everyone has highlighted, it'd be nice to have somewhere in Trelawney so people aren't having to go so far, particularly those who are based in Trelawney. That's probably, just from the money side of things, it's a bit difficult down in Cornwall, but a lot of other places have rented kind of vending machines where you can have a microwave attached to them. And I'm just interested to see if anyone knew about whether there was anything similar in the county. We've researched it, but everything seemed to be more up country. So happy to answer questions, and yeah, some input on that would be helpful.
Sarah, thank you very much, and thank you for the work you do in this role. It's really important for us to hear it. Alistair, did you want to make any further comment?
Yeah, no, just to thank Sarah really for the work that she's been doing and highlighting the areas of concern in our various teams. I think we're very aware that the downtime for our junior doctors is really important, and getting our rotas correct is really important. So only this week we've been talking with the clinical directors for the new care group structure. So 2 of our care groups have come together under one acute emergency care, and they've agreed to jointly manage the medical rota so that it's in one place, which should facilitate further scrutiny. But I think the focus on the junior doctors' rota is really important. You'll see from the report that's coming later from the Director of Medical Education that there is due to be, over the next 2 to 3 years, a significant increase in the number of junior doctors, foundation doctors and middle grades coming to RCHT. That comes with its own challenges, obviously, but that is a function of Chris Whitty's focus on coastal and rural communities, and the recognition that coastal and rural communities like ours have not always had the appropriate training grades directed towards them, and they're mainly focused in urban and city areas. So that is factored into our growth in junior doctors going forward. Which will improve the situation, but we know that our junior doctors also have other issues around coming down into the southwest in terms of cost of living, housing, etc. And with the specific issues, Sarah's highlighted the ones that we are currently aware of in oral maxillofacial surgery, and there are issues in that department that we're currently dealing with the clinical director. So yeah, and just thank you to Sarah and the team for the work that you do.
Thank you for that, Alistair. And I guess with regard to Sarah's last point, it might be even more important to find solutions to that microwave aspect if we're going to have more junior grades, but I know Rob wants to come in, so maybe he'll pick that up.
So exactly that, Mary, you read my mind. So Sarah, I'll just do a quick join up. We've been looking through facilities at hot food vend. So I'm fairly sure we've got a solution. So I'll take an action for me to find a resolution for that, and I'll bring you into the conversation, Sarah. Thank you for raising it.
Great.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Are there other comments or questions for Sarah? No. In that case, Sarah, thank you. And I really do mean thank you for what you do. I'm trying to say, as board and board members, we take every opportunity to demonstrate that we care, but you're actually our conduit for demonstrating some of that care for our staff. So thank you for doing that role. Appreciated. Thank you very much. We're asked to receive and note that Q3 report. Again, nods around the room will be welcome. Bringing us to item 7, the integrated performance report, where I am very pleased to hand over to Rob to take us through the report, if you would, please.
Of course, thank you. In the interest of time and to note the level of scrutiny that both Finance Performance Committee and Quality Assurance Committee take, I was going to do a brief summary, noting, as Isabella's commented, that we did a deep dive on orthopaedics in particular. Steve's report was already picked up around our emergency care performance. So unusually, I was just going to pick out one positive that I would draw to the board's attention. And the reason I'm doing that deliberately here is one of the things that we've reflected on from the board development session where we did the civility training is how can we celebrate our successes more? So we try and start our site meetings now with what's our positive? We go around the room because there's lots of positives. We heard one this morning about the MRI scanner, and just to really lift ourselves. So what I wanted to draw the board's attention to, noting we've picked up a range of areas that are a challenge for us already, is on page 233 of the packs, you'll see our 52-week wait performance graph. And in January 23, that was our peak of the numbers of patients waiting over 52 weeks. And that was 3,457 patients waiting over a year for their treatment. And you'll see in the IPR that we're reporting, the integrated performance report that we're reporting now, well, still a large number, but that has come down to 2,033 patients. And that's a really material change in the length of wait that our patients are waiting for treatment. Not where we want to be, just completely acknowledging that, but we have to see that is the dedication and hard work from all of our teams. So if there's one thing for me to draw our colleagues' attention to from a performance perspective, it's that very good news story, noting the other scrutiny that's happened. And so from there, I will do a check-in with Kim, Alistair, and then Alison if there's anything they need to highlight from their sections, and then hand back.
But thank you for doing that, because you're right, and it is the work of the board to focus on where we can improve, but we should note how much good that goes on. And I think also to feel what it means to be a patient waiting for a year and to take 1,400 off or thereabouts. I may have got my numbers wrong, but that's a huge, huge step. So thank you. Thank you for that. I'll let you take up.
Kim.
One thing to note, C. difficile has been a challenge, not just for us, but it's been a national challenge. But as a system of which we are absolutely involved, there's going to be a complete review of the antimicrobial guideline, and the main target is to reduce the amount of broad spectrum antibiotic use, and that needs to be done from a system perspective, because definitely for this one, we say it, we're all in it together. So it's, it doesn't matter which path, but how you get started, it has an impact. So we'll be taking that forward within the next few months, and I'll leave it there.
Alistair?
Just again, probably just to highlight some positives. So if you look at page 242, 243, in terms of our mortality statistics, our HSMR has been below the lower confidence limit for the last 5 months of the IPR report, and likewise our crude mortality continues to fall. We know that over the course of the last year, we have had a number of mortality alerts in a number of in a number of specialties, including fractured neck of femur, to be one that I'm really very close to. The numbers of alerts have reduced over the course of the last few months, and there is a lot of work going on around stroke, both within RCHT, but also stroke as being the stroke pathway being a focus of the ICB going forward into 24-25. But so just really good to see RHSMR, SHME and crude mortality all going in the right direction.
And that is the right direction, just to be for members of the public.
It is.
Going down is good. Yeah. Thank you for that.
And then Alison.
Yeah, so I've got 5 bits of good news. So hopefully that's within your remit there, Robin, and one area that I'm concerned about. So the 5 bits of good news is statutory training has now increased to 77%. Appraisals are now at 76%. We are continuing the trend on doing much better on retaining our staff, and our staff turnover is at the lowest point at 9%. Vacancies again for the 4th consecutive month are down to 9%. So those are all the good stuff, which is really pleased about. Oh, sorry, one more staff survey as of hot off the press this morning. Recommend RCHT as a place to work, up from 54 to 57%. And then the one area that I am concerned about, and we will be doing some dedicated work fairly shortly on this, and that is around sickness and stress. The levels are still too high on that. So thank you.
Mary, I'll hand back to you.
Thank you very much indeed. And I just pick up, Alison, that last point. It is of concern. I know that there is a lot of work going on to mitigate. I think it would help just to hear 1 or 2 of the actions that you're taking to mitigate that work-related stress. You're muted, Alison.
Thank you. At the moment, we haven't put any new interventions in. We do have a lot of support available through occupational health, through the people partners. We've got EAPs, we've got Together All, we've got a lot of support in place. But I think this needs a much more detailed, deep dive. I think we need to go back to some basics on training and ensuring our managers are always doing return to work interviews, and that we nip things in the bud. So yesterday, Alistair and myself joined a couple of people talking about a difficult situation they were managing. But at the heart of it, there was somebody who was feeling very stressed. So I think it's having those brave conversations and making sure we train our managers sooner to nip things in the bud around recognising that actually they're not doing so well. And so that's the piece of work that I want to be doing over the next few months.
Thank you. That is really helpful, and it is a very important piece of work, because although we do have our occupational health properly so, it's a bit, as I said earlier, a bit like equity and governance. It's everybody's business, isn't it, to be looking out for each other, but very particular for managers to notice the signs early. So thank you. Thank you for that. Any further questions, Ian?
Thank you. I just wanted to pick out, it's not a positive, I'm afraid, but I think it is important we get that balance, isn't it? It was in terms of the aggregated patient delay metrics, Robin, so the report pulls out really strongly, and when I read this, that quote in there of the highest seen in 21 months and 23,736 hours of patient time kind of just really struck with me in terms of patient experience. And I think I'm right in linking that to the delayed discharges being significantly above and on what appears to be an upward trend in recent months, so 135 in the report that we've got in front of us. I know there's been lots of work going on with system colleagues to address that and to find solutions to that. I just wondered what level of assurance we've got in terms of where that metric is headed against that target around the delayed transfers of care, and how that will then impact the aggregated patient delay. Hopefully I'm joining the right metrics together there, but do let me know if not.
Thank you, Ian. So there are a number of factors that are key on that aggregated patient delay. And some of those are within our gift. So for instance, we've got the R-Scout from I described this earlier, Steve chaired the meeting with our ED consultants, and then a range of actions in there. And one of those actions is we need to make sure that all of our services have plans in place that any expected patient doesn't go through the emergency department unless they need resus, can go straight to the relevant department. If an expected patient comes into ED and the ED clinician sees that patient, and not for me, because they're expected anyway, from an aggregated patient delay perspective, how the clock counts is, say ED says their episode is finished, all the time that patient's then waiting to move to the expected location, that clocks up aggregated patient delay. So that's a really important act that we can take, not only for the APD as you described, but also in direct response to the risk that our colleagues in ED are raising with us. We've got other actions that will also drive that APD down internally, which focus on what we're calling our non-admitted breaches. So there are patients that go home after their ED episode, and we're putting a lot of extra support and resource into how can we get that turnaround happen and get those patients through the emergency department and home again. Then there are the actions that we take on our wards in general in terms of day before planning. Who do we know is going to go home tomorrow? How do we make sure that they and their families, where they consent for us to talk to their families, are engaged in that conversation for how are we going to get you home tomorrow morning, not tomorrow afternoon? Because we know that if we can get patients home tomorrow morning, that gives us flow in the morning. That's more patients out of ED. That's further reducing that APD as you highlight. And in fact, it gives me a good opportunity to say to any members of the public that are watching, we really encourage you and your family, when you're on our wards, to challenge us, when can I go home? And work with us. There's a range of solutions we have as well at our disposal that can also help get you home. So if you need support, it doesn't necessarily need to come from our community providers. We have things like a discharge grant that can also help you take a loved one home and not need to put demand on the other bits of our system. So those sorts of themes really will support a reduction in our aggregated patient delay. They'll support an improvement in our 4-hour performance, and they will result in an improvement in our ambulance handover times. There are then, of course, as you highlight, where are we with our pathway 1, 2 and 3 waiters. There is a range of actions in train with our community partners, and Steve mentioned earlier about the winter plan reviews and where there are actions that have absolutely worked, and we can see that. And we are seeing at this point a reduction in the number of patients that are waiting on a pathway 1, 2 and 3. And we're seeing that in an improved position in our emergency department. Yes, we need to see that reduction increase, but it's important that we note that we are seeing that reduction. So it's split really across a whole range of internal actions and those actions that our system partners have committed to.
That's really helpful to say all of that. Thank you. And I know you know all this, but it's really helpful to lay it out. And I think your point about giving assurance to members of the public and members of our staff who may also have relatives that help is there. I think sometimes people are reluctant to ask for it, and they're reluctant to say there is a need. So I think our staff, I know, do talk. And certainly as someone who has had somebody in this hospital in recent months, I did pester people every day to say, could we go home? And so I think there's a responsibility also on the patients' relatives to be nudging us as well. So Steve, I know you want to come in.
It's not on that, it's on a separate area. Page 213 of 437 of the hard copy pack. I think it's 219 of the pack for those of us who are using admin control, provides an update on inpatient elective activity. And I just wanted to comment on that. Nationally, productivity is increasingly rightly a focus at a NHS England national, regional and local level. And an important part of that productivity is the volume of activity which has been undertaken. And that report shows that in January, our inpatient elective activity that we delivered was at 105% of the levels of 1920, so 5% more activity delivered in January from an inpatient elective perspective compared to 1920. And that's an important year, as a pre-COVID year. My understanding is at a regional level, it's about 100% or thereabouts. So it's really, really positive, Robin, to see that significant increase in elective activity compared to 1920, and from what I understand, also compared to other parts, at least in the southwest region. Particularly significant to note the significant higher performance around completed RTT pathways, and I think what that means is we're completing the elective pathway for significantly more patients than would have been the case previously. And even more significant, Robin, I think, is the diagnostic activity, which is operating at a significantly higher level. And we know that has a really significant impact on the care that's delivered. So just to recognise a significant increase in elective activity.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you. So, colleagues, I think we have discussed this report, and thank you, Robin, for taking us through that. We then move on to item 13, and as I said when introducing Isabel, this is the assurance report from Richard as the chair of the Finance and Performance Committee, who, again, like the Equality Committee, do a great deal of the heavy lifting for our board. So, Richard, if I could ask you to give us your report, and I do note that there are some business cases also within there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, and I'll again take the report as read in interests of time. You can see from the report there's a large amount of business that's been done over the last couple of months. And so happy to take questions on any of those. I'm going to touch on a few themes that have been raised throughout the meeting already. No apologies for that, but it's just to give a sense of the scrutiny assurance that FPC, Finance and Performance Committee, are going to be looking at now and into the future. So a large proportion of our work has been taken up with looking at the end of year as we move towards that process, and I won't say much about that as Ian's just about to report on the next item on month 10 reports, but looking at our revenue and our capital position, and we'll continue to seek the assurance through scrutiny of those figures to make sure that we get to the right place in a challenging environment. Equally, we've been spending quite a bit of time looking ahead at the 24-25 plan. Notwithstanding Steve's comments earlier around we haven't received full planning guidance around that, so we're working on a certain set of assumptions. And particularly to note, I think, for the board that the high level of savings that are required by achieving that plan, and particularly recurrent, again, as we talked about cost improvement plans earlier, that resonates strongly next year, and we were doing a lot to seek assurance that those are realistic plans. Important to note to the board, I think, at this moment that as yet it's not a break-even plan, but we're working to rectify that and address that, particularly, as has been mentioned before, alongside the assurance around quality and safety and the workforce plan that will be required to deliver that. I think it's important that we should note, I think, at a board level also that the impact of the 24-5 plan will have on our mid-term financial plan and the joint forward plan going forward on behalf of the ICB and the system. So we really need to be mindful of how that's panning out in our operational financial plan next year. I think the other thing that we wanted to flag from the committee is just the scale of the transformation programme. We've been talking about this for a while, and we did have a session in January as a board to look at that, but again to recognise the continued scrutiny around development of an assurance framework that will surround all of that work. And as you've noted, there's a number of business cases that we've done that feed into that. But it is on an unprecedented scale, so it's really important that we keep our focused lens on that. I think we've given some partial assurance in the report around our cost improvement programme for the reasons we've said, around the annual plan for those reasons I've just outlined, and to some extent our IPR, as we've just discussed, just in some of those metrics are not quite where we want them to be. The other thing I think that was important from FPC over the last couple of months is, and the board have did it in private last month, is had our first look at productivity and our relationship between the 2019-20 pre-COVID year and where we are now. We think that's a really important lens to be looking at and looking at our decision making through. So we are looking to embed that, and anyone who's followed some of the commentary around the budget over the last few days will note that public service productivity is a key feature of UK growth. So it's going to be an important lens for us to look through for some time. Happy to take any questions beyond that.
Thank you very much, Richard. I know how much depth you go into at your committee, so the report is there for people, and we'll come to it in a moment. Is there anything anyone would like to raise with Richard? No, I think comprehensive report has its rewards, Richard. Thank you for that. So we are asked to note the recommendations to the board to approve business cases as noted there. Then if we could come on to yourself, Ian, on the revenue month 10 report.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So yeah, this is the month 10 position, which takes us to the end of January. So overall at month 10, we've got a 1.5 million deficit position as an organisation, and that compares to a £300,000 deficit plan at this point in the year. So that's 1.2 million adverse to the plan that we'd got at that point. That's predominantly being driven by the industrial action that we saw. So this report captures 2 of the 3 months of recent industrial action that we've had with junior doctors. So this includes the December and January costs, which total around 1.7 million across those 2 months. I do have some positive news on that though, which is that we've now had confirmation that there is funding, as there was in the earlier part of the financial year, to cover that cost. It's been allocated out on a similar basis to last time, and our expectation is that whilst there'll be a shortfall against our estimated costs when we include it next month with the impact of the February strikes, that clearly that's a significant financial offset against the additional costs that have been incurred. So that should be seen as a positive step. So we've got confirmation of £2.3 million, and we estimate our costs, including the February strike, will be somewhere in the region of 2.8 million. So hence the slight difference that I referenced. There's some good bits I want to pick out of the report. So agency spend was its lowest all year, which it's still above our cap, and we know that challenge increases into 24-25, but the work of Alison and her teams in terms of driving down that, and as we know, there's real quality improvement links to having our own staff delivering care for our patients. So that's a really positive step. Steve's already alluded to the performance on elective income, and the paper notes that continues to have the financial benefits that are associated with that, as well as reducing patient waits. So that's really positive that that's in there. It's been quite a tricky couple of months with the level of uncertainty. Normally by this time I'd like to sit here and say I've got a definite kind of year-end position. We're not quite in that position, but the report notes that with that confirmation of industrial action funding, we'd expect to be delivering a surplus somewhere around 1.8 million. We need to do further work to refine that on the back of the February position, which we've got this week. And we'll be looking to see how we can deliver what will be a surplus position. So I'm confident that we'll have a break-even or a small surplus position, and that will, as Steve alluded to earlier, help support a system delivery of a system break-even position. And the report touches on it, but just to remind board members in particular, there are significant benefits from achieving that financial break-even in 23-24. And we shouldn't forget that when we set the plan as a board for this year, that was a very stretching and ambitious plan. So some of the conversations we're going to have around 24-25, we've managed to mitigate some of those things this year really well. The cash position at the end of January improved, so that was up at 19.2 million against a plan of 11 million. So that had been an area of focus, particularly with the Finance Committee, in terms of the timing and the fluctuations in our cash position. It's something we keep a really close eye on through my team and through the committee. That increased slightly at the end of February, so that's not in the report, but as of the end of February, we're at 21.4 million. So we do expect that to drop at year end, and as ever, some of that will be about how many cash payments we make before year end and into the new financial year. But our forecast is £10 million as a cash balance at the end of March, and I'm happy and feel confident that we'll be in excess of that. And then the other point, just to pull out, which has already been alluded to a couple of times, is the movement in SIP. So it's not reflected in this report, but there was a very good discussion at executive level and a communication out to the organisation in terms of our ambition and our need to deliver a higher level of recurrent SIP. So that will just exceed 40%. It's going to be around 41%. That does, though, mean that the scale of SIP that we'll be needing to deliver next year will be a challenge on top of that. And Richard alluded to the need for 60% of next year's SIP to be recurrent as well. So that just continues to show the scale of challenge that we've got in that area. But I think also demonstrates a good movement. We were a national outlier and certainly a regional outlier on our level of recurrent SIP. So that action, I think, will bear fruit in terms of how we take this forward. So I'll probably pause at that, Chair, and happy to open it up to questions and take the rest of the report as read.
Thank you, Ian. That was really helpful and comprehensive and understandable to me. It's always nice to understand things. Colleagues, are there any questions for Ian? No, looks like you've done as good a job as Richard did there. Thank you for that. So we are... I beg your pardon, Alison.
Just one question for Ian. It's good news that we are having the strike money covered, but I just wanted to understand more about what the gap is, because it isn't 100% coverage, and this will be the second time that we won't have been fully recompensed for the strike action.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the way that it's allocated is based on workforce numbers for the groups of staff that strike. So often when national funding is allocated, it's done on a proportionate basis, whether that be by population or the kind of mathematical formula they use to allocate funding out to individual systems. With the strike action, it's been done more in terms of the number of the workforce that was affected. Obviously, being the only acute provider in Cornwall and Isles of Scilly, that has an impact on that because the funding for Derriford strike action, for example, goes into the Devon system. I think also it reflects partly how we've backfilled. So it's a mixture of the cost of backfilling in terms of acting down payments, but also the impact of time off in lieu. So it probably reflects some of the challenges we have in terms of our geography and our ability to cover and keep continuity services. But also we've had the benefit of not having as much impact negatively on our elective activity during strike periods. And I think that's partly at play as well, in terms of we might be doing more to maintain our elective capacity as well. So it's quite a difficult one to give a straight answer on, but I think hopefully that gives a flavour of how it's calculated. It's not something we have a particular say in, but certainly in the national messaging around it, they're taking consideration of both the elective variable income that an organisation has been able to achieve during strike action, as well as the direct cost and direct funding. So they are taking those two things as a combined when they look at how funding's been allocated.
Thank you very much, Ian. Does that help, Alison?
It does. Thank you, Ian.
Great. Thank you. Any more? No. Then we're asked to note the financial position of the Trust after month 10, to note the system forecast position for 23-24 linked to the recent industrial action and work being undertaken, note the improved cash position and actions to manage cash risk into the remainder of the financial year, including the recovery of this through the route to break-even work, note the elective recovery funding position and total approvals, and note the risks and actions outlined in the paper. So again, nods around the room, but noting in the chat for those not here, please. Bringing us on to 13.2, the month 10 capital report, please. Ian.
This one will be a bit briefer again, taking it as read. So the current capital budget for the organisation, £43.7 million, gives you an idea of the scale of the projects and work that's been going up through this year. We're very much on plan year to date, so only £100,000 behind plan at this point on the overall capital programme. There has been significant work, and it's worth me reflecting on that publicly, by teams to make sure we're maximising the opportunities to spend our capital in year. So we do naturally see some slippage against schemes that are approved in the capital programme, but the work of the capital approvals group and the subcommittees that we have across estates, digital, and other areas has been really useful in terms of making sure we're getting maximum benefit out of that. So our current forecast, as outlined in the report, is for a slight underspend of a circa £200,000 underspend. There is now, we're at the point where there isn't enough time to order things and spend much more between now and the end of March. But there's, as I said, there's been an incredible amount of work. So the team continue to look at the mitigations for any late slippage in that. And obviously, we are also measured as a system on our capital envelope. So we're also linking closely with system colleagues to make sure we're managing that risk at a system level. But if anything, that slippage might mean that underspend is slightly higher than the 200,000, but I wouldn't expect it to be materially higher than that number. And we will do everything we can to make sure that we maximise every penny of that, as we've got a good track record of doing in previous financial years. And then the other element to capture is a really positive one. Again, in terms of the capital plan for next year is already set in draft. So each of the care groups and clinical teams can commence the work and the business cases that support delivery in 24-25. That's something we've achieved a couple of years in a row now, and is not normal across all of NHS organisations to have that set at this point. We've benefited from having the allocations in advance, which is something that's really helpful from the national team. And in the report, there's a list on page 318 of the commitments against that plan for 24-25, and that's something we'll continue to do and into 25-26 as we look across that multi-year horizon in terms of our capital programme. So I'll pause at that again, Chair, and take any questions or comments.
Thank you very much. And did that last, in terms of getting the plan in place early so we can start using it early, is something that we've worked hard to achieve. So it's really good to hear. Thank you. Are there comments or questions? Steve.
Yeah, really helpful report. Great progress in the capital programme. Just a comment. I think section 3.4 provides an update that at the time of the report being written, the aim was to enter into contract for the Women and Children's Hospital by mid-February. That work continues to be underway, so that contract has not yet been entered into, whilst partner organisations review the capital cost profile. So we would, I think, currently be expecting that contract to be entered into later on this month, and we'll provide an update at the next board meeting.
It's like we're going to the wire with it. It's we've been on TED Talks about it for so long. But was that you indicating, Richard?
Just very briefly, just thank you. Yeah, and that's the reason we gave a partial assurance to the capital report, was very specifically around the Women and Children's Hospital. But I also wanted just to echo Ian's comments around just what fantastic piece of work it is that we do. I mean, I haven't done the quick maths in my head. It's about £40-odd million worth of capital investment, and we're talking about we might be 200,000 away from it. So just a fantastic achievement by everyone again across the trust, but marshalled by our finance team to ensure that we do match every penny that we can and don't end up with underspends. So fantastic work. Thank you.
Well said. Thank you. Other comment? In that case, we're asked to note the financial position for the capital programme for the period to 31st of January, and to note the Trust expects to operate within the capital departmental expenditure limit budget this year. So if we could just note that around the room and come on to 13.3. Lindsay, the terms of reference for this committee.
Thank you. So presented are the terms of reference for the Finance and Performance Committee. There are 2 recommended changes to the terms of reference, and they relate to amendment in the title to the Chief Performance, Partnerships and Transformation Officer, and inclusion of the remit to the committee in relation to monitoring and monitoring the performance of our Green Plan. The committee reviewed the changes at our last meeting, and they are recommended for approval today. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. And also just to note, these things don't just happen. They take work to achieve. And thank you to the committee for doing that. Anybody have any comments? Richard, any thoughts? Ian?
I just had one reflection, particularly linked to Richard's point about productivity, is whether we need to call that out specifically in these terms of reference, or whether we're comfortable that it's sufficiently covered in the kind of the generic terminology that's used. That was because you're right, it's been a big focus within our committee, within Finance and Performance Committee, and the work we've been doing as a trust, but clearly that's going to be a very significant national focus in the budget as well, from what we've heard yesterday.
Richard?
Very useful, and I think if we could ask Lindsay to take that away and just come up with the right wording, but yeah, that'd be very helpful, I think.
Thank you. So what we can do now then is approve the amendment to the title from Chief Strategy and Performance Officer to Chief Performance Partnerships Transformation Officer. We can approve the inclusion of the addition under the performance section terms of reference to the Green Plan, and perhaps you would circulate e-governance approval for that last.
I could just suggest, because in May board we are due to receive the annual report from the committees, so therefore any suggested changes we could include in that recommendation to the board then. Is that okay? Thank you.
Sounds good. Yeah. Right. Thank you very much. Well done, everybody. It's 12 o'clock, not 12:05. Then we are going to take a lunch break. I propose that we do take the time, so you've got extra 5 minutes for good behaviour for lunch. And the lunch will be arriving soon. And Sarah has generously provided some chocolate brownies for those people lucky enough to be in the room, and they are on the back table. So to members of the public and others not able to have chocolate brownies, I'm sorry, and we'll see you at 12:25. Thank you very much. Everyone's had a little bit of a break. We will be continue our meeting now at item 14, which is our values and supported people. And Isabel has kindly offered to stand in for Adam in presenting the People and Culture Committee Assurance Report. So thank you very much, Isabel.
Thank you, Mary. I hope I could do justice with Adam not able to be here. And apologies, I wasn't there to enjoy a brownie during the break. So the People and Culture Committee meet bi-monthly, and this is a report that you'll see in your packs relating to our recent meeting in February. There were a few areas that we wanted to escalate to the board for noting. The first one being around the level of stress, work-related stress, which I know has already been talked about a bit in this meeting today, but it is quite scary when we see that, over 2,800 days are lost through stress-related absence. So it's encouraging that Alison and her team are going to be putting some emphasis around strategies to manage that. Similarly, I think despite the slow improvement in statutory and mandatory training, it's still of concern to the committee and therefore for the board to just be mindful of the fact that this isn't where we would want it to be, understandably with all the operational pressures, but nonetheless, we feel it's really, really important that we are able to achieve the targets that we need to around statutory and mandatory training. So that's the first point that I think Adam wanted me to make. The second was very much around OD, and again, we've had some discussion already in the meeting about OD, so I won't repeat that. But I think it's really important that now that we have found some resources to support the OD implementation, which is great news, that we now crack on with delivering the OD plan. And in particular, one aspect of the plan, which is in phase 1, I think, around leadership, is also to have a focus around improving our career progression arrangements and our talent management arrangements. So we're hoping that we'll be able to see some improvement there as it falls under that phase 1 of the plan. So we would like to see that. I think 2 other points that Adam wanted me to raise, the first being around the completion of the occupational health review, which is a really important piece of work that's been carried out within the organisation. And the findings of that review are being discussed and actions are being implemented. We want to just assure the board that work is going on to reduce the risk around service provision, but also we are concerned about the physical location of the occupational health service, and we're hoping that some work can be done to tackle that, and it may already be in progress. I'm sure Alison may wish to comment. And I think the final point, which doesn't appear in the report, but again through conversation between the chairs of committees, we are concerned about the lack of our own workforce plan in relation to the system workforce plan, given the timescales that we're facing around our operational and financial and quality issues. It's absolutely critical that we really understand the implications of all of those areas on our workforce. So we would like to see more progress and more detail coming to committee around the workforce plan. So I think those were the key issues. I don't think I'll take any more of your time. Happy to answer questions. I'm sure Alison will help me in fielding any questions.
Indeed, Isabel. Before I come to questions, Alison, is there anything you wanted to add to what Isabella said?
Yeah, I just would like to agree with the points that Isabel made, in particular regarding the location for the occupational health team. They've been working through and delivering clinical services with quite a few physical interruptions in terms of sewage and other types of interruptions, which makes it a very uncomfortable working environment and not great for our staff who are utilising those services. So really welcome Brian starting next week, and I certainly will be knocking at his door to try and resolve this, because it's been going on for quite a long time. The second point around the workforce plan, this is kind of a bit of a moving feast at the moment, as the team are currently working up the numbers for the medium-term financial plan. We don't yet have a system workforce plan of which RCHT would fit into. However, we are supporting the work that the system is doing in terms of identifying new areas for delivery of changing the care pathways, and that work will be supported through the workforce efficiency plan. We have got a regional long-term plan, but at the moment there is a disconnect because of the finances between the long-term plan and the medium term financial plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison. Ella, I'm sorry to pounce on you, but I'm just wondering if you might be able to help at all with regards to the occupational health siting.
Yes, we are undertaking work at the moment to seek alternative space. I think, as people are aware, especially at the present time with the decants and moves we've got because of the new build, it is a very, very complex jigsaw. So it is being looked at, and it is being we've asked for it to be prioritised for the reasons Alison stated with regards to very unpleasant working conditions at times. So I can't give a definitive answer, but I can just give that assurance that we are looking into it actively.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Anybody got any further questions then for Isabel acting as Adam? She is a member of that committee, so she does know what went on. I guess one of the things that I noticed, and I know we have touched on it earlier, but in rolling out an organisation development programme, we are going to need that commitment from everybody to enable people to go on the programme. And I'm just wondering, I don't really know who to look to, but what do we need to do to support colleagues in letting members of their team join an OD programme? Because it's good to see the mandatory and stat training improving, although still not as much. And I must say, and I should have said it earlier, it's great to see the appraisals going up and being where they are. It's fabulous. But what can we do as a board, perhaps, to support people in getting to these programmes? Steve?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. Other colleagues might want to add to it. I think the first thing is really strong engagement with our clinical and operational leaders across the organisation. And this, Alison, I think has had significant discussion in our executive leadership team to ensure that it is framed in the way that most reflects the kind of desire, benefits and opportunities that our executive leadership team and our wider executive development team would see. I think that's had a couple of implications. One is it's probably extended, Alison, the timeline for the plan to be concluded and then progressed. But it has strengthened that engagement. So I think that would be the first thing. Secondly, the programme work that Robin talked to before, the 4Care for Patients 4 hours, and the wider work to improve our flow would also have the impact of assisting in the ability to take part in this programme as those operational pressures are kind of mitigated. So I think that would be the second part that would be an important component.
That's helpful, thank you. I don't know if anybody else wanted to comment. No, that summarises. I just know, as we all know from personal experience, it almost feels like it's an all or nothing. It's like we're all doing this or we're not, and then it doesn't happen if we're not all doing it. So that's assuring. Thank you. Any other questions for either? No? Okay. In that case, we're asked to note that report from the February meeting of the People and Culture Committee. And if I could then move on to 14.1, where I think, Alistair, you're going to be speaking as Lawrence Moulton wasn't able to come.
Yeah, that's correct, Mary. Thank you. So apologies from Lawrence Moulton, our Director of Medical Education, who's away on a course today. I hope I can do this report justice in his stead. So this report has been through the People and Culture Committee, and I think there are I'll take it as read, and there are 4 key points which I think I'd like to just bring out. Our postgraduate centre and Lawrence Moulton and Joanna Gilbert, who both run the postgraduate centre, have prided themselves for a very long time on the quality of the returns from the National Trainee Survey. We did see a significant dip in that in 2022 into 23, but it's really pleasing to see that the results from the 2023 survey have bounced back, and there's been a significant improvement as demonstrated in the table in figure 3 and figure 2. I think what Lawrence would want me to pick out is that in terms of our educational supervisors, so that's the team have done a really important piece of work engaging with educational supervisors, putting forward training programs for them. And in terms of the supervision that they give to our training grades, they're in the top 25 in the country, which and have remained there, which is great to see. In addition, they'd want me to highlight that the Royal College of Obstetrics and Gynecology had surveyed their trainees every year, and they'd rated our training here as in the top 10 in the whole of the UK for junior doctors. So I think that's a fantastic testament to the team. We know that the Postgraduate Centre, not only do they have a role with our trainees, but they also have a pastoral role with lots of our other doctors as well, our trust grades. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about was the international medical graduates. And they have instigated a bespoke programme for those doctors joining our trust who've been in the UK for less than 12 months. And that, again, has been highlighted as an example of best practice and is being assessed by the South West Deanery to see if it can be used as a model for other trusts around the South West. So that's a really, really good piece of information and which should be celebrated. In addition, the resuscitation team, who we will see later, the lead for that we'll see later on, they run a number of nationally recognised courses out of the postgraduate centre, which are always well regarded and bring in revenue for the trust. And the final thing really is what I alluded to earlier, which was the significant expansion in training grades that we're expecting over the next 3 years. I think that in conjunction with the expansion that we've had into international trainees, in trust grade doctors, physicians associate, medical support workers, and the pastoral support of all of that, means that the postgraduate centre is going to have to expand to be able to manage that. We're going to need more educational supervisors. We're going to need arrange more. So there is a plan to look forward at the expansion of what the postgraduate centre can provide, and especially in a view to potentially having a medical school here as well, because they're involved in the conversations about that. So those are the 4 key things that I thought I should bring out of this. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Alistair. That's really good news, although there are implications for us. Are there questions for Alistair? No, I think the report really is very clear. And it's a shame that Lawrence couldn't be here, so perhaps you would pass on to all of them. It's great to see the way the reputation has come back up again, and it really does help in all sorts of ways. It's not just help with recruiting at those levels, it helps recruiting consultants too, and feeling that we've got really good quality here. So I think that's great. Thank you. So we're asked to note this medical education annual report. If we could note it with nods. Thank you. And then perhaps, Alison, you could offer us the clinical medical education annual report. Pity it hasn't got more positive title, really, isn't it?
Indeed, thank you. I'll reflect on that for next year. Thank you. So I just want to draw out 5 points from this report. The first point, which highlights the training of management of aggression and violence in terms of challenging behaviour, or MAV training. You can see that the report stresses that actually we do have underutilisation, classroom utilisation happening, although we do prioritise the training according to the highest area of incidents, such as ED or Tintagel, etc. So there is opportunity to train more staff, and hopefully, as Steve spoke about a few minutes ago, when the operational challenges become less, hopefully we'll see increases in the numbers that we can support staff through. The second point I want to make is around partnerships. And I think what this report really does illustrate is our continuing and growing partnerships with external bodies such as Truro and Penwith College, University of Greenwich, where we are continuing our work with our nursing associates, but also looking at Exeter and Plymouth, and the University of Derby, who are supporting us in growing our talent in radiography. There's also sort of looking at this work, which takes me to my next third point. We have a trend that our apprenticeships are not as many as they were, but the apprenticeships that we are doing seem to be at a higher level. One of the things that we struggle with in having apprenticeships, and everybody is extremely positive about having apprentices, is when that apprentice then has to leave the ward environment, etc. That sometimes is seen to be a negative because there isn't any money to backfill that person. However, we have increased our use of the levy to 93%, and that's a year-on-year utilisation. The fourth point I'd like to make is regarding T levels. And T-levels were only introduced in 2020 as an alternative to A-levels, and they're growing in popularity. I was very fortunate to meet twice in 23 two sets of T-level students, and you can see how through having a system approach to placement throughout RCHT, CFT, that we've actually retained 9 out of 17 T-level students at RCHT. And then my fifth and final point is around CPD funding. That has not been confirmed, not surprisingly, for 24-25. It slightly fell in the last year in terms of a total budget of 700,000, but we do utilise all of that budget to the maximum. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Alison. It's really interesting to hear how widespread our university academic support is for what we're doing. Are there questions for Alison on this report? Sarah?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much indeed for such a useful report and update. It may be my ignorance, so I apologise. I really didn't understand the point you were making about the apprentices. I thought the whole idea was that people would be apprentices here, and at the end of it, they would then be considered, it's not guaranteed, but they would be considered for employment by the trust or other parts of the NHS. So perhaps you could just clarify what the issues are that are preventing that from happening. Clearly, you demonstrated the T-level candidates, quite a lot of those, once they've completed their T-levels, are subsequently being employed.
Yes, actually, we find that apprenticeships is actually a really good source of recruitment and retention for us, because most apprentices are interested in, if I've confused you, Sarah, most apprentices are very much interested in staying on and working for us at RCHT. What we struggle with is, whilst we have an apprentice, if you talk about the traditional sort of one-day release in terms of educational support, where they might go off and virtually work from home, such as in our collaboration with Derby, or they might physically be attending one of our colleges, that's where the care groups struggle, because there isn't somebody waiting in the wings or the money there to backfill them in terms of the role that they are playing physically on site.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. Richard?
And my comment relates to both reports, really, but they're not specific to either, which is why I've held it back till the end. I think I understand why we see a medical education and then a non-medical education report, but I'm just wondering how we as a board get sight of the way in which interdisciplinarity runs through our educational processes, particularly when we're thinking about a workforce plan for the future. Our successes are delivered by teams, and therefore the educational process perhaps should reflect that team approach. And I just wondered how we, again, I think I understand why we have to report in this way, but how do we as a board get sighted on the way in which we're preparing our future workforce for an interdisciplinary environment and a wider skills scaffold?
Yeah, thank you, Richard. I don't know, Alison, if you can come back on that one.
Yes, so I will check with Lindsay, but I think these are 2 statutory reports that we have to produce for governance. But it's a really good question, Richard, and maybe something the People and Culture Committee can do more of a deep dive on, because literally every single day we are thinking about how we skill shift, how we grow teams, not just about professions, although there is a focus clearly on areas of shortages, and you heard Alistair comment about that earlier, but it is very much a team effort in terms of how we deliver our services. So we can perhaps illustrate that through a deep dive and a presentation at People and Culture Committee.
really helpful and welcome, Alison. Thank you. Kim and then Alistair.
Yeah, if I can add to that point as well. So simulation training is taking more front and centre to do that MDT approach, Richard, which is really important. But I think a conversation that Alistair, myself, Alison and our counterparts in CFT have to have is there's very bespoke, there's a more, what shall I say, dedicated pathway for our medical colleagues, and there's funding set aside for that, so we have to account for that. But I do think it's as we move forward, I know Alison and Alistair and myself have spoken, it's how do we start to get that better triangulation, because we know we've got advanced nurse practice colleagues, we know we've got fellows, there's all different. How do you start to get the best of that, which then lifts into your rostering as well? You know, how do you get that amalgamated roster based on skill set as opposed to role? But and some of that will come through the workforce transformation. But then going back to apprenticeships, I think having a dual role, and now Alison having the dual role, the apprenticeship scheme is far stronger because money has been centralised. I think some of the issues, and I can say that because I've been here a while, whilst it sits in the care group, it's harder to release. So I think we've got to have a better conversation that says apprenticeships are important. How do we, I'll use the word top slice for a better word. How do we take that money out? And then how do we then guarantee and give that assurance to care groups who are under tremendous operational pressure to be able to have that confidence that we'll manage that and be able to give the backfill, which is working better at the minute at CFT than RCHT.
Really helpful, Kim. Thank you very much. Alistair, and then Aled, sorry.
Yeah, so I think the other thing to be aware of is that we have good examples of that multidisciplinary learning and training in the trust at the moment. And if we think about women's and children's, for instance, they do a huge amount of training as a team. And things like resuscitation training are often done multidisciplinary. The whole resuscitation team would be, doing their resus training together. So I think we do have really good examples of that multidisciplinary training in the organisation. It's just how it becomes visible to the board is probably something that we need to think on and maybe learn from women's and children's. Yeah.
And as Alison said, we can check around the governance of this, but maybe we could think about how we make this one report, even if it has to reflect both, and that it can pick up in the ways that we've just been describing. Aled.
I'd briefly add the non-clinical education plan as well. So we've got clinical here, non-clinical, but we need advanced project managers, advanced leadership, innovation technologists who may not fit into these. And I know for good reasons, Richard said why it isn't there, but that kind of joined up workforce plan. And I suppose it's just a warning note that I've mentioned in people and organisational development committee anyway, but just more broadly is what isn't in the national long-term workforce plan that we need to keep an eye on. So, for example, midwifery isn't mentioned, even though it's in a good place at the moment in terms of recruitment, retention, etc. Social care nursing, which I think is absolutely crucial. So, in a way, what's the RCHT long-term workforce plan alongside that? I'm sure there is one, but just to keep an eye on that. And in terms of, just understanding the sort of contribution where that investment needs to go outside of what's going to be dominated when the payments for the long-term work plan come through. So just having that kind of local understanding of what we need to prioritise, especially I think social care nursing and new roles. Where do they fit in? Completely new roles that we haven't seen before. So just keep an eye on those things as well.
Yeah. That's very helpful. It is this business of form follows function, isn't it? That we've got to keep changing in order to be agile, but to reflect what we're all needing to do. And it is probably a very different workforce. So I think Alison, the People and Culture Committee, you've got a big job on your hands.
No problem. So I was just going to follow on Alan's point, which is a really good point, because I've not thought about this before. We put a huge amount of effort into training our team, and that covers a whole range of local needs and widely recognised IT and digital training. So be really happy to share that so that people could see the work that's already done, which now we've just got on and done.
Thank you. Sorry. So I think one of the actions from here is perhaps for the People and Culture Committee to recommend a different kind of report that would make this more visible to board, even if it had to encompass if they are statutory things that we have to do. But yeah, really good points made around the table. Thank you. So we're invited to note this report. If we could nod around the table, please. Thank you. And Lindsay, for the terms of reference for this committee.
Thank you. Presented other terms of reference for the People and Culture Committee. Similar to that, we've already discussed around Quality Assurance Committee. The one change is regarding the inclusion of the Interim Director of Nursing, Midwifery and AHPs in attendance at the meeting. The committee reviewed the proposed changes and are recommending to the board today for approval. Thank you.
In which case, let's approve it by nodding or writing in the chat, please, and move on to yourself, Sarah, on the Remuneration and Appointments Committee Assurance Floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll just be very brief. Just really for the benefit of people who are watching, there's often a lot of interest in pay within the NHS. What this committee consider is the national pay remit. So this is something that's sent to us because senior managers in the NHS are paid within bands, and the Trust is really just asked to deliver on the national pay rate of the bands and what the increases can be. And that's what the committee did at its last meeting, and we discharged those duties. So it was a very straightforward meeting. I'm happy to ask any questions, although considering this is about senior management pay, it affects pretty much everybody in the room. And so I don't want to, answer any questions that could identify any individual person's salary, because that would be completely unfair.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I think you make a really good point about it being on that meeting, considering national matters. Yeah. I don't think there are any questions, so please, if we could note those matters that Sarah has raised. Thank you very much. And come then to Sarah's other committee, that we are now, in considering the Charitable Funds Committee Assurance Report, we are acting in our capacity as corporate trustee of that charity rather than non-exec members of this board. So if you could give us that report, please, Sarah.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll take it as read because I know everybody's very good at reading their papers. There's one thing to note. In the assurance paper, you'll see that it makes mention of a paper coming to this board meeting, and you'll notice that you didn't receive that paper, and it will be coming to the next board meeting, and that's really a summary of all the fantastic work that the charity does, and the staff in the charity, and indeed the executive colleagues around the board table today who support the charity, as well as the non-executive colleagues. So rather than waste executive colleagues' time producing a report for today and our annual report, we'll receive the annual report at the next meeting. I think the only thing I would raise for the board's attention is that while we are making good progress on the family appeal, there have been the inevitable bumps along the road, and at the next committee meeting we will be looking at costings for both a 12-bedded and an 18-bedded unit, and really wanting to firm up what exactly it is that we are going to build, and not only the building but the range of services that are going to be provided, which will be so beneficial to our community. So I think by the time the committee's considered that, which is next week, there'll be a further update to the board, which will give more detail and more assurance about that. I know we've got Alison with us. Similarly, I think the work with the Duchy Charity and the funds that they would like to give us, which are incredibly welcome, that's still work in progress. We haven't quite made the progress that we would like to be able to report to you, but I know that Alison's been doing a lot of work behind the scenes. We'll be receiving further updates at the next committee meeting, and again we'll be able to update the board at the next board meeting in public, which will probably be in May. I think it just really highlights the extent to which we like to work with our community in partnership with others, which is really important, but it also has its challenges because those partners and those organisations have their agendas and their time frameworks, and actually making sure it suits everyone and is going to work for the greater good does require quite a lot of careful consideration and work behind the scenes. So we didn't get, I can't give you 100% assurance on those particular projects, but I do feel they're going in the. Alison wants to add anything to that, or is just nodding with my sort of summary.
I am nodding with your summary. I think, as Sarah says, we are on the verge of crystallising some more money towards our appeal, but we can't quite announce that yet.
It's yet to come.
It is good news. I'm just wondering, for the benefit of members of the public, should we say a little bit more about what we're attempting to provide? I mean, I know we don't know exactly what it is, but
yeah, in a nutshell, as I'm sure people, members of staff, and you know the communities we serve will understand, you know, the Duchy is a very big geographical area, including the Isles of Scilly. We do serve the Isles of Scilly, and for many families who have to come to the hospital quite frequently, either with children or with adults, there is nowhere for them to go at the moment. To have some peace and quiet, to do some laundry, if they're here each day caring for people, to cook a meal, and to receive some real emotional support from us as well. So we want to create that space for people who are needing to come to the hospital regularly to support their loved ones with this bespoke facility. And our staff are really enthusiastic about this because of the additional support it will provide to those carers of our patients, and that psychological support to enable those families to carry on caring, and potentially some practical, a space to provide some practical training and interventions, for example, cannulation training, all sorts of training to support families to confidently take their loved ones home and continue their care at home, or when they're not here receiving that care. So it's a hugely important and valuable development to create this this family hub. It's a key part of our Women's and Children's Hospital. It's a key part of our delivery of that enhanced and improved service, which our clinicians have been really involved in creating and are right behind. So, but we do want to get all the details right before we go to the public and ask them to have all those coffee mornings and pedal for patients and all the wonderful fundraising that companies actually do and our staff do, because we will be looking for a large sum of money, probably in the region of, we're not certain yet, but around £4 million. So there will be more details yet to come in the summer and in the autumn.
I saw our finance director's eyes widen when you mentioned it. Thank you, Sarah. I just think it's worth
largest appeal. It will be the largest capital appeal we've ever had as a trust.
Yeah. The other important point to that is it's also located on site, and that's a key part of it. It's not just near the hospital; it's on the hospital site, and that's been partly what's taken some of the time in terms of developing where that's possible to do.
Super. Thank you very much indeed. Please, could we then note Sarah's report? And move on to our governance and risk section. And Richard, you're move seats. I'm looking at Andy. You're helpfully going to report on behalf of Adam.
With apologies to Adam, I'll try and do him justice. I'll take the report as read in the interests of time. I think Adam wanted to draw attention of the board to 4 or 5 different factors. Firstly, the first 2 are noted in the escalation part of the report, that we do note that a business case for security management services across the whole trust is being developed, and that will pass through appropriate trust processes. But I think from an audit risk and assurance committee report, we want to underscore the importance of that case, and we'll also be seeking assurance on the processes and the solution that resolves part of that risk around security management. Secondly, we wanted to highlight that despite some of the ongoing challenges in estates and people and organisational development, as you'll see in the partial assurance given in the report. There has been some really good improvement and there's some really good advancement on a number of those internal audit recommendations and actions. So the report itself might look a bit negative. Actually, we did want to pause and reflect the success of a large part of that development. I think thirdly, Adam wanted to draw attention to the BAF, which is to follow as an item here, and just to recommend the BAF to the board. It's an excellent piece of work. I think we also just wanted to raise from the committee that there is an ongoing need to continue to develop a system assurance framework into which we can nest our board assurance framework, and that will be a big advancement. So again, anything that we can do to help drive that system assurance framework and support the development of that, we would wish to do so. I think we noted in an escalation of risk, potentially a small escalation risk around children in care, but we've sought children in care undertaking care within the trust. We've sought further assurance of that, and we've received some assurance offline, and we'll pick that up at the next committee meeting. But we just want to be assured that that's correctly captured on the corporate risk register if appropriate. And then finally, there was a piece of work that we'd asked for consideration around the item under losses and special payments, which we give full assurance to. But we did wonder whether the delegation levels relating to the sign-off for some of those losses and special payments could do with revision, so that when the committee takes assurance, it's taking assurance on the level of delegated authority given. And I think that's the point. Those are the points that Adam wanted to raise.
So a really helpful summary. Thank you. Are there points on that? Just on that last point, Richard, will the committee be receiving something back about the delegated? Yeah.
Yes, my understanding is that the committee will then receive, under the revised policy, the revised delegations, but the Ian, as Finance Director, will be bringing that forward as the recommendation.
Yeah, it's through a review of the standing financial instructions, standing orders and scheme delegation.
I went.
Next week's Audit and Risk Assurance Committee.
Great. Thank you. Thanks very much. Any more questions about that committee? Thank you then. We could note that from the January committee and move on to Lindsay with the board assurance. Oh, actually, I've just remembered a question I was going to ask. Sorry. Apologies. It was that system assurance framework. Maybe you can pick it up, Lindsay, but there's something for me about, we have been talking about a system assurance framework for some time, and maybe just an update on where that's at. Perhaps you could cover it in the same item. Thank you.
Thank you. So the report outlines the updates to each element of the board assurance framework, which are considered at the relevant committee meetings and with our executive leads. Changes are intentionally made in track changes for board colleagues to understand and see those changes since the last agreed version, which was actually approved at the board in November 2023. The board members will note in the report, and as outlined in the recommendations, there have been an increase in a couple of the board assurance framework elements. This includes BAF element 2, which relates to workforce, and there's an increase in our overall risk score from 12 to 16 at Q4, and then a risk score increase in BAF element 3, which relates to optimising integrated health services, and that's an increase from 9 to 16 in Q4. Board colleagues will also note that within the recommendations there is a change being reflected in Q1 of 24-25, and that's relating to BAF element 6, which is the estate's infrastructure. My apologies, the report says it's an increase from 9 to 19. It's actually a typo, it's 9 to 12, so my apologies for that. I'll rectify that. These increased risk scores reflect the level of ongoing actions to address gaps in assurance. Mary's obviously just asked about the system assurance framework. We haven't developed a system assurance framework yet. Discussions with our COSEC colleagues on our risk leads across the system will need to be taking place rapidly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's helpful. Does anybody have any questions on those proposed changes? No? No? No. So I don't propose to read that all out because Lindsay's effectively just covered it. So I'd be grateful if colleagues could indicate their agreement by nodding or otherwise, and colleagues online could indicate in the chat. So we're agreeing the revised overall scores, we're noting the risk score, and we're agreeing the recent amendments. People are nodding at me, which is great. Thank you very much. So again, I think this is Lindsay. Item 15, the summary consideration of risk. Lindsay plus anybody else in the meeting.
Thank you. I'd welcome colleagues to comment also, but I'll cover a couple of areas. We've talked about our financial challenge, which remains ongoing and is reflected on our BAF and within our corporate risk register. We talked about the scale of our transformation programme, again reflected on both, but we noted obviously that there is a review of our assurance framework to oversee this. We talked about staff health and wellbeing today. We talked about our staff sickness absence rates, and we talked about staff mandatory training. Both are reflected again on the BAF, but I think we'll consider a little bit further, Alison. I'd suggest that we look at those. We noticed improvements in our ED and our ambulance handover. I think again we should consider those at our next BAF session to consider any potential changes and the further mitigations that we're taking. And I noted some positive assurance received around the industrial action mitigations and the funding in place.
Thank you, Lindsay. That's helpful. Anybody noted anything else we might have missed? Ian?
There was the quality impact assessment discussion. I don't know if you mentioned that, Lindsay, just
the EQIA.
Yeah, the
EQIA,
which,
thank you.
again, I think are probably covered relatively well in our current BAF, but probably just one for reflecting in the next update.
Thank you.
Ian. Really helpful.
And just on the consideration of risk with our emergency access standards, I think it's fair to say that most of that consideration was taken through the committees rather than here. We commented on the fact the committee, both Finance Performance Committee and Quality Assurance Committee, had really scrutinised the actions and plans associated with that, but we didn't discuss it in detail here, did we?
Thank you very much, which then brings us pretty much on time to the questions from the public. And our company secretary has been monitoring those. And I'm now going to invite you, Lindsay, to read out the questions and direct them to the right director. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair, we have 6 questions in total. A couple of questions were raised ahead of the meeting, but the remainder were raised during the session today. I'm going to read them out and then I'm going to pass to executive colleagues, if that's okay, to comment. So the first question is from Jane Burnell. Why are visits to minor injury units included in the denominator for the 4-hour target for RCHT, given that many other trusts report only their type 1 ED figures? I'm going to pass to Robin Askew to comment.
Thank you, Jane. So most national reporting works that are at what we call an all-type level, and therefore RCHT appropriately reports in accordance with the national rules in partnership with both Cornwall Foundation Trust and the ICB Integrated Care Board's agreement of the as our regulators. And because we subcontract the MIUs to Cornwall Foundation Trust, that's why they form part of our numbers. So that's why they're in there. To add a bit of context for your question as well, Jane, if I may, it is worth noting that Cornwall has a high rate of what I would term as non-type 1 attendances, and that's because of the extensive MIU network that we have in Cornwall. This is successful, ensuring that largely only patients that need to attend the Trelisk site attend the Trelisk site, and that we've got one of the highest rates of type 3, so that's MIU and UTC attendances recording of pretty much any county in the country, and that's a reflection of our strategic drive for those actors across Cornwall. We call it, care closer to home, that happening. But what it does also, however, mean is that the case mix at the Trelisk site, RCHED, per person is relatively more acute than we see in other trusts in the country. So when you do a type 1 performance comparison with other trusts in the country, they will have more, they're likely to have more type 3 attenders in their type 1 because it's based on location, not the acuity of the patient that arrives. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have a second question from Jane Burnell. At November's board, a review of excess deaths was mentioned. What are the terms of reference for this review and how is it getting on? I'm going to pass over to Alistair as Chief Medical Officer.
Yes, thank you, Jane. So in September of last year, we were alerted because there were some national figures which suggested that we had more than expected deaths on our elective waiting list than would have been expected. When that was flagged to us, our teams, through the Mortality Review Oversight Group, investigated all of those cases, and there was a data quality issue in that national data, meaning that a number of admissions were being recorded as elective admissions when, in fact, they were emergency admissions. And as a result of this, the records, and in discussion with our ICB, the records have been corrected in January, and a repull of the data for the financial year in April will occur. And it's expected at this point that the mortality for that group will be in expected limits.
Thank you.
The third question was from Anonymous. Thank you for the presentation on scanning. What is the current policy on the provision of medication for sedation for people undergoing scans? Again, I'm going to pass that to Alistair as Medical Director.
Thank you. So it's an interesting question and timely in that the pathway for these patients is currently under review. Historically, what we have done is for patients who are anxious about coming for those scans, we worked with primary care to in the prescription of anxiolytics. Unfortunately, that our primary care colleagues have decided that they do not think that we should do that. So there's been a review, or is undergoing a review of that pathway. But whilst that's underway, we do review the use of our various different types of scanners. So we will put patients on the new scanner, and we do have wide bore scanners for people, for wide bore CT scanners that we can put people into. And we can also, at other sites in the southwest, we have open MRI scanners, but they're not suitable for all types of scan. Where those aren't suitable, then general anaesthetic is what we would turn to. So there is a review of that particular pathway underway.
Thanks, Alistair.
Thank you. Our fourth question was from Anonymous. A recent media report suggests that 80% of people being discharged from hospital need some form of ongoing care placement or support. That seems extraordinarily high compared to other parts of the southwest and the country. What is behind this? I'm going to pass to Robin. Thank you.
Thank you. So for clarification, over 80% of all patients are discharged without any ongoing care support, which is slightly lower than the Southwest regional average, but it is a slightly different number. Of all patients whose discharge has been delayed, however, around 90% of them will be awaiting for care and support in their own home or a placement in a residential or nursing home setting.
Thank you. Our fifth question is from Jane. Are the elements of the winter plan agreed by the ICB in place now? Is it anticipated that the winter plan will now work to improve timely care for patients in the community and RCHT for what remains of the winter? I'm going to pass to Robin again. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. So the system-wide winter plan has delivered a number of schemes successfully, such as, and Steve mentioned them in his report, the X-ray car, the Falls car. There are, however, some other elements of the winter plan that have been more challenging, such as the delivery of 14 additional dementia care home beds, which to date haven't delivered. As a result of the analysis as a whole system of the winter plan, some of the investment is now being reprioritised for alternative schemes now, one of which is working with our commissioners to commission additional care at home capacity, which is known as Pathway 1 capacity.
Oh, thank you, Robin. Sorry. Last question is from Sarah Weston. She asked, if occupational health is due to be relocated due to the unpleasant working conditions, will the patient information team, who are also based in the same location, are they also being considered as part of that overall relocation? I'm going to pass to Ella to comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay. Hi, Sarah. Thanks for your question. I think ultimately it's best if I can pick this up with you directly, but I can add that for the occupational health move, we do have an options appraisal that has been completed by the estates team. So we have options in play that just need to be considered. My assumption within that is that any other affected teams in that building would be included, but I'd need to check that specifically with you, Sarah, to make sure. If we can pick it up outside of the meeting, that would be really fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Alison, I think you wanted to come in.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think there's two parts to this particular problem. There's one about ensuring that occupational health have suitable clinical environment to carry out practice. And then I think there's the second bit around the suitability of continuing the use of the building when we have problems with floods and sewage issues, etc. Thank you.
I suggest, Ella, that you let Lindsay know so we can include in the minute whatever the outcome of that conversation is. Thank you. Any more?
No, that's all questions. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you for that. Thank you to members of the public. As I said at the beginning of the meeting, we do really value you being with us and we really value your questions. And I think it might be the next meeting we're having a questionnaire. So from time to time, and we certainly have done this before, we have invited members of the public joining the meeting to fill in a very short questionnaire just to give us some more general feedback. And I know that Lindsay and her team have been working on that, and we're hoping to have that up in the May meeting. So it'll be well, I'll ask Lindsay to tell you. I think it's online.
Yes, it will all be online. So yeah, so what I'll do is I'll pop it in the chat in the live Q&As. Therefore, anyone watching will be able to comment, and we really look forward and welcome those comments. Thank you.
And I know in the past that we've had suggestions for doing things differently, and we have implemented those changes. So it will be really worth you writing that in for us. Thank you. So then item 17, we always, in all our committees and in board meeting, have a brief reflection at the end of the meeting to say what went well, what would have been better if. We check whether we've been consistent with board etiquette, how we've contributed to patient safety, how we've contributed to the health inequalities agenda, and whether there are matters we need to communicate to others. And that's an open forum for anybody around the table. But poor old Usma, particularly for Usma, seeing as she's new, I didn't do this with you, did I? I did. Oh, that's all right then. Good. I'm glad I did. Asking a brand new fresh eyes if you don't have to start though, don't worry. You can come in later if you want to.
I'm happy to
You're
start.
happy to start. Go ahead.
Yes, that's turned on. Well, firstly, I thank you for my first board. I was impressed with how clear the reporting was and how concise today's discussion was. So thank you for being gentle on my first one. Also, not too many acronyms, which was helpful, but I did have my acronym guide just in case. But really just very impressed with the amount of hard work being done across the trust for the people of Cornwall. I'm, humbled to be here and contribute to that. But thank you to all of you.
Thank you very much, Usma. You can be harsher in your comment as time goes on. Thank you. So how have we done today? Done well on timing. Thank you. Robin.
I think we've remembered to celebrate success. It's really easy when we're focused on making things right, only focus on the bits that aren't right. And I think we've done well to balance the areas where we're striving to make improvements, but recognising the areas that are doing very well.
Thank you. Ella?
Yeah, and I think the story at the start was a really good reminder of the value that our charitable partnerships can have. And as we're embarking on a really ambitious development programme, it's really good for us all to bear that in mind, isn't it, for the real value add that we can gain.
Absolutely, yeah. Isabel?
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm, you know, watching this remotely and joining in remotely is always a bit challenging, but I think what struck me today was at the start with the board story. That was just wonderful to hear. And I just think that, you know, we're not always the greatest at singing our praises about things that are going particularly well, and particularly where there's new innovation and transformation, which is going to ultimately support the care that we're offering to our community. So I think that board story put me in the right mood for this meeting right at the start, which was great. And we have heard a lot of positives coming out from today, which I hope that we'll continue to hear. I remember in the Quality Committee, when we were looking at the medical education report, I challenged Lawrence to say it's great being in the top 25 and in the top 10 of certain things. When are we going to be coming in and saying we're at number one? You know, so in terms of being harsh, I think we just have to continue to strive to demonstrate that in some areas we could be definitely number one. Thank you. Thank you.
Alison.
Yeah, on top of the comments already made, for me, I think today we've had a good level of discussion around our strategic ambition and the progress that we're making towards that. You know, you heard very loud and clear in terms of research, university status, medical school, and strengthening our existing partnerships. As Robin said, good balance on bringing out the positives, but also, as Isabel illustrated, you know, that level of challenge. We still know we've got lots to do. And then one really minor point, but I think we've forgotten our etiquette a little bit around hybrid working. So I don't know if there's something Lindsay can put together on that particular issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more in the room? I guess I just want to celebrate all that green on the staff survey. It's a real joy to see that, and I think it is credit to all of the work that everybody does in the whole trust. And when I feel that, I certainly feel I spent at least the last 2 years saying thank you to people for going above and beyond and working so hard. It's absolutely marvellous to see that staff survey result, which shows, I think it goes back to the civility point that was made earlier, that it shows that even though we are under such pressure, we have actually managed to go on behaving in line with our values. And I think that's a great thing to celebrate. Anybody else? No? In that case, can I thank people very much for attendance today. Our next meeting of our board in public will be the 2nd of May. And the board members are now going to take a short break before we move to our board session in private, where we consider matters that are deemed confidential, as you can see on the notice of motion in your papers. So thank everybody very much, and we will reconvene at, Lindsay, 2 o'clock.
2 o'clock.
It says 2:30. Anyway, it is 2 o'clock, isn't it? 2 o'clock. Thank you all very much.